Humanity and our digital progeny are transforming our lives, our business, and our planet at an exponential rate. What was once science fiction just a few years ago is now science fact, making what was once miraculous now seem routine. What was once the purview of multinationals and heads of state is now child's play and available for free online. Converging exponential technologies are growing and overlapping into tsunami-sized waves that are reinventing industries, rearranging fortunes, and, without doubt, rewriting our future. So what does the next 10 years hold for us? Predicting the future is difficult under any circumstance, but perhaps the prevailing metatrends can offer us a glimpse of the exponential road ahead. So let's count down the top metatrends impacting humanity, increasing global abundance, and giving birth to the next few trillion-dollar fortunes. Our first metatrend is the awe-inspiring speed with which we are blanketing the Earth in gigabit connectivity, linking everybody and everything 24 hours per day at ultra-low cost. Billions of people and devices are exchanging data, transactions, points of view, music, Google searches over an ever-expanding 5G terrestrial network and thousands of orbiting Starlink satellites. This is a future of abundant information and connectivity in which you can know anything you want, anytime you want. Our second metatrend is the arrival of humanoid robots and avatars, fulfilling service jobs that are dull, dangerous, or dirty. Elon Musk said it best about the Tesla bot. This technology will upend our idea of what the economy is and bring about an age of abundance. Our final metatrend is artificial intelligence. Specifically, its pervasive deployment throughout our lives and the expectation that it will reach human-level intelligence in the years ahead. Ray Kurzweil predicts human intelligence by 2029. Elon Musk predicts it will grow vastly smarter than any human and will overtake us by 2025. And while this may cause fear for some, it's important to realize that this technology is our greatest tool for slaying grand challenges and creating global abundance. So don't blink. The future is most definitely faster than you think. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Exponential Organizations 2.0 Mastermind. We're going to be with you for the next 3 hours. Believe me, we could be with you for the next 3 days and not cover this.
Yeah, there's so much to cover. Super excited about today.
If you would, Salim, I'd love you to introduce yourself.
Okay. So folks, I'm Salim Ismail. I'm from India originally. I'm Canadian, 10 years in Europe, 20 years in the US, so I'm pretty confused. I was the head of innovation at Yahoo, where this journey really starts, and then helped build out Singularity University as its founding executive director. Then I wrote this book, Exponential Organizations, which has kind of taken over. Peter and I are now writing this and launching the second edition. And I'm on Peter's board at the X Prize Foundation.
Peter Diamandis here. I have been a serial entrepreneur all my life. I love building companies, built a number of universities, International Space University, and the founding executive chairman of Singularity University with Ray Kurzweil, run the X Prize Foundation as the executive chairman with an incredible CEO, Anusha Ansari. My passion and my mission is helping entrepreneurs like you go big in the world. At the end of the day, we're living during the most extraordinary time ever in human history. Very proud to be partnering with Salim on EXO 2.0, really with a mission to uplift humanity, help you play the biggest game you can. So let's talk about what we're going to be discussing here today. Again, we could be on stage covering this not for 3 hours, but for 3 days or 3 weeks. Please, the book is your guideline. It's your how-to, it's your case studies, it's everything you need.
So what we're going to be covering is what is the basis of all of this? What do we mean by an exponential organization? Then we're going to cover the characteristics of one. Most importantly, how do you build one? And that's where we'll get into really the steps on how you take yourself with an MTP into a global challenge and transform the world.
That's our mission today. Yeah, let's see how you get involved.
So the book has launched. For this week, and this week alone, we're making it available for 99 cents. So if you want to buy books for your team members, your colleagues, friends, etc., this is the time to do it. It's already hit #1 on a couple of categories on Amazon, so we're super thrilled. And Peter, talk about Ray K.
Yeah, so let's keep that QR code up there if we could. One of the things that we did that's different than ever before is we built this into a living book. You can imagine how rapidly this is changing. It's so difficult to write a book and say, we've got to include this, we've got to include that. So the team built an AI that allows you to query the book. Ray Kurzweil has been an extraordinary friend, the chancellor of Singularity University, a mentor for both of us, and we've named the AI Ray K in his honor. It's free. You can use this AI to help you actually create an exponential organization. Want to talk about where it's going?
Well, I think we're going to create a global ecosystem around this, right? And so as we get into this, first of all, I just want to thank the entire EXO community. Peter, your Abundance 360 community. We've had unbelievable support from MBO partners, Casper, the Global Entrepreneurship Network, the Genius Group, and others, Singularity University, where this kind of all started. Special thanks to all the contributors and writers from my community that worked tirelessly for several years, and mostly to Lisa Pereira, who's been cat herding us for the last 3-4 years now. And big shout out to the Silicon Valley Press team, and also Kerry and his team at Igniting Souls. So let's get into it.
And hello to the watch parties out there around the world, throughout Africa, Europe, Asia.
And especially, there's apparently a huge watch party at NSU, the Levant Center for Innovation in Fort Lauderdale. Welcome to all of you.
You know, Salim, let's kick it off with what is an exponential organization? No one better than yourself to share that.
So this all started at Singularity University when we were running these one-week executive programs, and people would go, and actually those are the highest rated educational programs in the world, okay? So people come to the end of the week and go, okay, I got the disruption. What the hell do I do on Monday? And the book was basically a response to that. And what we did was we scanned 150 to 200 of the biggest unicorns in the world to say, how are they doing? How are they scaling so fast? Because starting from 2008, we saw a breed of organizations scaling at a pace that we never seen before. And that's what we mean by an exponential organization. Now, the book came out in 2014, the first version, and we now have almost 10 years of data and statistics. So for example, we had an original list of the top 100 EXOs. How do they do over this last 7, 8, 9 years? About half of them have gone IPO or being acquired, which is an unbelievable success rate for organizations. But most importantly, when we first launched the book, we actually ranked the Fortune 100. The biggest 100 companies in the US, ranked them against this model, okay? And we did a segment on CNBC Squawk Box presenting this index, basically saying, here's a ranking of the most purpose-driven, flexible, agile, scalable org structures. To what extent is IBM using lean startup thinking? To what extent is GE purpose-driven or not? And we came up with this index. Over the last 7 years, we've been tracking which of the top 10 organizations that use these characteristics and attributes the most, and which use them the least. Chandra Nagpal, one of our community members, worked a lot with UBS, et cetera, did this analysis, looking right into the stock market engines to get real data. And then over the 7-year period, we compared the results. How did the top 10 most flexible and agile versus the least flexible and least agile do over a 7-year period? And remember, this is just in the Fortune 100. So in this over 7 years, the top 10 outperformed the bottom 10 by like almost 3 times on revenue growth, right? 6 times higher on profitability, 11 times higher on return on equity. But the killer number was shareholder returns, or what they call CAGR, compound annual growth rate. The top 10 in the Fortune 100 most EXO friendly outperformed the bottom 10 least EXO friendly over 7 years by 40 times, right? We had to like triple check the data because it sounds so ridiculous. So that's the difference between why? Because as the external world becomes more volatile, which we can see, your ability to adapt is going to drive market value, right? And now we can prove that 6 ways to Sunday. So that's the basis and thesis and the data we've been gathering. We now have thousands of stories like Genius Group with Roger Hamilton, which went from zero, followed the book, one of your A360 members, and now has gone public. Right? So there's thousands of stories like that. we're pretty clear that over this next decade, every company, every nonprofit, every impact project, every government department will be structured this way just because it's just that much better.
Now, when people talk about a why should you be thinking about becoming an exponential organization? I mean, the numbers are the ones that...
The numbers are crazy, and it's really important to frame what's happening in the world that makes these new organizations go, and what's the shift that's happened. So, Peter, why don't you take us through the fundamental sea change in what's happened in the world?
Sure. The reality is there is a new kind of organization in town, right? This is not the kind of company that your father or grandfather started. And it's the fact that we're going from a linear to an exponential world. The challenge is that our brains, the 100 billion neurons, the 100 trillion synaptic connections, they evolved in a very different world. They evolved in the savannas of Africa hundreds of thousands of years ago, where everything that affected you was within a day's walk, and nothing changed generation to generation, literally millennium to millennium. And our brains evolved for that world, and our minds are local and linear. But we're living in a world that is global and exponential. Things are not changing day to day, they're changing hour to hour. And your reach to touch people is now the ability to impact 1 billion lives if you truly want to go that big. And so when you think about it, this is what it looks like. This red line is all of us. It's our investors, it's our shareholders, but this yellow line are the exponential technologies that we're using, we're building, we're investing in. And the disconnect between those two is either disruptive stress or disruptive opportunity. My mission in this segment of our mastermind is to give you a sense of an exponential mindset. So I talk about exponentials. What does that mean? What does that feel like? Again, we're all linear thinkers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 30 linear steps. You're 30 meters away. You've gone out your front door. You've crossed the street. But in 30 exponential steps, where an exponential is a simple doubling, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. In 30 doublings, you're not across the street. You've gone 1 billion meters away. Put differently, you've gone 26 times around the planet. And it's that disconnect between linear and exponential that's really extraordinary. And it's what you as an exponential entrepreneur can take advantage of. Exponentials are not intuitive. I'll give you another example that I love. You take a piece of paper, it's about 0.135 millimeters thick. How thick would that be if you folded it 50 times? Very simple question. You might think it's, 50 times 0.135, but that's not it, right? We've got these doublings occurring. If you were able to fold a piece of paper 13 times, and you're not, but if you could, it's about 1 meter thick. If you doubled it 20 times, how far is it? Oh, it's about a football field. US, European, doesn't matter, roughly the same. 38-fold, and you have gone around the planet. And 50-fold, the original question, it's from here to the sun, 93 million miles. And that disconnect is really what we need to understand, that our intuition is linear, and the world around us is exponential. So what we're seeing today is faster, cheaper computers are the bedrock. They're the soil in which all these other technologies are growing: sensors, networks, AI, robotics, 3D printing, synthetic biology, AR, VR, blockchain, even quantum technologies. And it's the convergence of 2, 3, or 4 of these that we as exponential entrepreneurs and organizations are trying to do. You could make a business before with just one, but it's really bringing a number of these, converging them together, that are transforming industries and creating disruption. There's no better example of a disruption, and I'll use this through our session here as an example. Kodak in 1996, at the top of its game, $28 billion market cap, 140,000 employees. What most people don't know is that 20 years earlier, a guy named Steven Sasson in Kodak Labs had invented the digital camera. And he takes it into the board of Kodak and goes, "Here's the future of Kodak." And they said, "It's a toy for kids. It takes 0.01 megapixel images. And besides, it's in black and white. And we're in the paper and chemicals business, our profit center." And so they didn't take advantage of the digital camera. And a few decades later, they're bankrupt. In the same year that Kodak goes bankrupt, another company called Instagram
gets acquired by Facebook for $1 billion, but they've got 13 employees. And people laughed at that acquisition. Well, they're not laughing now, right? Where the valuation of Instagram has been and above $100 billion. And so the question is, what business are you truly in if you're running a large-scale organization? Kodak was not in the paper and chemicals business. They were in the business, their MTP, we'll get to that, of preserving people's memories. When a better technology came along and they failed to jump on it, that set them adrift. You know, all of this is being driven by what's called Moore's Law. Here's Gordon Moore, the founder of Intel, who creates the first integrated circuit in 1958. This is what that circuit looks like, and literally began to double year on year. Every 12 to 18 months, it began to increase the number of transistors per piece of silicon. And Gordon Moore predicted it would continue for some amount of time. It was called Moore's Law. Well, it's continued for 50 years. And today we're seeing literally integrated circuits that have a 28 billion-fold increase over the last 47 years. I don't know how to fathom a number that big. And here we see what Ray Kurzweil calls the law of accelerating returns. It's that last 50 years of integrated circuits, but what we've seen is computation going from mechanical computers to relay, to vacuum tubes, to transistors, to integrated circuits. Every time one of these technologies runs out of steam, the next technology takes over. And it's continuing this way, and it will. We'll go to three-dimensional computing, photonics, quantum computing. So it's moving forward. Now, one of the frames that I wrote about in bold, and we'll talk about it, and I want to explain it here, is the 6 Ds of exponentials. It's one of the fundamentals of building exponential organization. Your mission is to digitize any aspect of your business possible, because when you begin digitizing something, you're able to dematerialize it, make it zeros and ones. And if that's the case, you can demonetize it because the cost of replicating those zeros and ones is effectively zero, and democratize it because your ability to transmit it to the corners of the planet is effectively zero. In the early days, like in that first digital camera, the growth is deceptive. The first digital camera was 0.01 megapixels. The next year was 0.02 and 0.04. Very slow, deceptive growth. But remember this, double something 20 times, it's a millionfold bigger. Double it 30 times, it's a billionfold. And eventually it disrupts. So you've seen these images before, right? On the far left is what it was like for me growing up, Radio Shack. And today, all of these things are now available on your phone as an app, completely dematerialized. And we're able to demonetize entire products and services. Your mission, again, is to digitize, to demonetize, and ultimately to dematerialize and democratize your products and services. Now, there's an analogy that I use about what's going on. We talk about it in the book, and it's an asteroid impact moment. So let's go back 65 million years ago when a 10-kilometer asteroid struck the Earth. It changed the environment so rapidly that the large, slow, lumbering dinosaurs could not survive. It was the furry little mammals that were agile that were able to survive and ultimately become us. So for me, the analogy of the asteroid impact are exponential technologies. They're changing the environment so rapidly that agility is your key to success. Buddy, over to you for Death of a Linear Organization.
Yeah, I just want to add a couple of things to that commentary. One of the favorite ways I was framing it when you talk about 30 steps is if you go 30 steps linearly, it's really easy to gauge where you might be a third or two-thirds of the way in that progression. We're really good at that linear extrapolation. But if I take 30 doubling steps and go to a billion and I'm 26 times around the world, it's really hard to gauge where I am a third or two-thirds of the way. And as leaders, we need to make these approximations, right? Think about Peter's comment about the folding paper, right? It's inconceivable to us, for many of us, how that actually operates. And so this is the unbelievable switch. The one favorite analogy I have is if the speed of a car had increased at the same pace as Moore's Law,
yes,
we'd have cars that went faster than the speed of light today, right? So like, just get that into your head in terms of linear versus exponential. But let's talk about, so that's the fundamental world that we're living in. Let's talk about how our organizations have been evolving to not keep pace with this in a sense, okay? So when you look at the classic organization, we have a whole section in the book called Death of the Linear Organization. Our organizations globally, government departments, corporations, et cetera, are typically derived from a military context. Top-down hierarchical command and control, really good for scarcity, really good for short-term aggressive things, finding a market that doesn't change very much, and then doing products and services in that marketplace. Innovation almost always comes from inside and then you push it out. These organizations tend to be risk intolerant and very slow. And the whole org structure, KPIs, performance reviews are designed to mistrust the employees. Right? So that's the context and framing for almost all of the organizational design, coming from the Industrial Revolution down to today. Okay. And it actually resulted in a fellow called Ronald Coase positing an economic theory for this that's now called Coase's law. He wrote a 9-page paper in the 1930s for which he won the Nobel Prize, basically saying that large organizations exist because the transaction costs inside a big organization are cheaper than the transaction costs outside. Therefore, it's more economically efficient to have big companies, and that kind of laid the economic thesis for why we have big corporations that got bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay? However, the challenge with big companies is you have what Jeff Kowalski first told me. He was the CTO of Autodesk. He goes, oh, you were Yahoo. You had a big immune system problem. When you try anything disruptive in a legacy organization, the antibodies attack you, and you get one of these rationales for why things cannot change. Peter, you've seen some of these.
I love these, right? 50 reasons, some of my favorites, it just can't be done.
Yeah, or we don't have the money.
Nobody else has ever done it before.
We've tried this 60 times.
It's beyond my responsibility, sorry, not my job.
Yeah, it can't be done.
And I don't like it. It's not our problem to solve.
Right. It needs a committee to study this, and we'll get back to you.
Yeah, and the competition's not going to enjoy this.
All of these kind of messages, and there's 50 of these. This was put together by Riaz Shah of Ernst & Young. The thesis, and this is a big challenge, and you have big problems with immune systems in every big company in the world, and then it gets worse in government, right, where the regulatory and the policy is the immune system. And then it gets worse in public sector, where taxis are fighting Uber, bankers are fighting Bitcoin. And this problem is summarizing all of the resistance to change that we have around the world. Let's hear from Julie Hanna, who summarized this problem very well.
The insight that EXO had, your thesis and insight about how companies try time and again to bring innovation in, but there's this immune system that attacks it. I mean, that was a revelation. It was a revelation on the level of innovator's dilemma to me. And because as soon as you identify it, you say, oh, that's that invisible hand that we just keep throwing good money after bad trying to address, and we don't really know what's undermining it. Now, not only have you identified this, but you've developed this very systematic methodology that in an incredibly accelerated amount of time starts to really transform the immune system problem and help an organization kind of unlock its superpowers, if you will, to go after the innovation it seeks. And so the way that you've done that is so concise and elegant and efficient that, it's such an accelerator. I think it's profound to me. I think it's profoundly important. There's not a system in the world, an organization in the world that doesn't have this phenomenon and couldn't benefit from this methodology. So that's why I draw a lot of inspiration from your work and your thesis.
So, if big organizations, which are basically the main modality by which we do business and commerce in the world today, and that's not going to work very well, how do we navigate this? And really, John Hagel and John Seeley Brown summarized this. They said big companies are organized for two things. They're optimized for predictability, and they're optimized for efficiency, right? If you're McDonald's, you're trying to deliver the exact same Big Mac in 1 million locations around the world using standardized supply chains and a product strategy that's very linear. So all of our big organizations today are designed for linear, incremental, static environments that don't change very much.
And that is not the world we're living in.
And Peter just showed how radically the world is changing.
And by the way, this immune system isn't just for 1,000-person organizations. I've run into immune systems in 10 and 50 and 100-person organizations. It's when you have been successful and you don't want to lose what has made you successful, but that's not going to take you to the next level, especially as things are changing so dramatically and rapidly.
I have a great example here. Marriott Hotels today is worth about $50 billion. Okay? Turns out if Marriott had launched Airbnb, TripAdvisor, Booking.com, their market cap would be about $250 billion, about 5 times what it is today. The irony around that, and the reason we use that example, is all of those ideas were sitting inside Marriott, but the immune system would not let it out. Right? So for fear of cannibalizing the existing $50 billion market cap, they're leaving $200 billion on the table. And this is true for almost every big company in the world, the inability to deal with this. And maybe David Rose, who's the godfather of angel investing, kind of summarized this well. He said, any company designed for success in the 20th century is doomed to failure in the 21st. Okay? Let's note that as we look at these new breed of exponential organizations, there's not a single MBA program in the world that can teach you how to build Uber. Every MBA program in the world would teach you how to build a 20th century organization. Right? So there's a massive update that's needed across all of our education systems and teaching systems for how this works going forward. So let's talk about what exactly is an exponential organization. Right? And when we were building Singularity University, we actually had the dean of one of the top business schools come through. And after trying to explain what we were doing, after a few minutes, he asked, how big is your team? And we looked around the table, and there's like 5 of us. And you could see his mind break. Like literally, he kind of left the building. And 5 minutes later, he goes, can we go outside and play Frisbee? And he was like gone. And we realized that something fundamental has changed since about 2008 of how do you build organizations, starting from probably when Amazon Web Services launched, because now you could take computing off the balance sheet and make it a truly variable cost. Okay?
Yeah, I was going to say, and it's the challenge is if you're starting afresh as an entrepreneur with an idea, looking to build an EXO, there's a playbook. The challenge is, what do you do if you're running a multi-1,000-person organization, right? And you've got biases. You've got the experts who are ingrained in running it the way it's being run, because otherwise they're no longer the expert anymore.
I love what you say. The expert is the guy who can tell you how not to do something.
Yeah, exactly, right? How it can't be done. And it's true. And the day before something is truly a breakthrough, it's a crazy idea, right? So if it's a crazy idea, when I'm speaking to large organizations of any size, and I'm saying, if you truly want breakthroughs, where inside your organization is your crazy idea department? And if you don't have one, then you're stuck in incremental and linear growth, which means you're moving effectively backwards. I mean, this is what I do with my Abundance 360 community of CEOs. My job is to help them understand that crazy is, in fact, where you begin. And we'll talk about this in the context of a massive transformative purpose and taking moonshots.
So let's get into what do we mean by an exponential organization. Okay? Now, when we scoured all of the unicorns to come up with this model, it's important to understand we didn't invent anything. We basically tagged what they were doing and basically harvested and canvassed it all and elucidated this basic model. So our definition of an exponential organization is a purpose-driven, agile, scalable organization that uses accelerating technologies and Peter's 6 Ds to dematerialize, democratize, et cetera, resulting in a 10x better performance than its non-EXO peers. Okay? And so this is basically the fundamental definition, that you can deliver. Now, in the Fortune 100, we saw 40x. Okay? But we stick with 10x as a nice round number.
And by the way, in order for someone to actually switch from a brand they trust to something that is new and novel, there has to be at least that 10x for people to let go.
Yeah, right? If something's 10% better, the market will ignore you.
Yeah, because they're going to go to the tried, true, proven brand that they're used to.
10 times better, you can't ignore it.
You can't ignore it, and the value of making the change is worth it.
A combustion engine car has about 2,000 moving parts in its drivetrain. The Tesla has 17. Right? So in terms of maintenance, design costs, reliability, it's just street lights ahead, and it's not going to go backwards.
Street lights ahead. I like that.
It's an old analogy from my old days. Okay, so we've talked about what, we've defined the exponential organization. And look at like Figma, right? Gone from 0 to $20 billion market cap in 7 years. Mercado Libre out of Argentina is now the #1 stock market performer in Argentina. And of course, we've seen ChatGPT explode out of the gate at light speed. Okay? Let me give a couple more examples. TED was just a nice conference, 1,000 people a year going to Monterey. Chris Anderson takes it over. He does 3 things. Establishes a huge purpose, ideas worth spreading. Then he puts all the TED Talks on YouTube, leveraging rich media. Then he allows anybody in the TED community to go create a TEDx event. And in a few years, he's created a global media brand at a cost of near zero. So think about this. He took an established small environment, blew it open to global level at almost zero cost. Right? That's unbelievable to be able to do today. Let's give you another example in a slightly older thing. So take used cars, right? How would you radically transform the used car industry? Traditional, very materialized, very physical. Maybe you have an app, maybe you have a better warranty for the car, etc. This is Guazi, a Chinese used car sales company. What they do is when somebody wants to sell a car, they show up, they gather 250 data points, audio, video. They take an audio of the engine and they use machine learning to sense the perturbation in the engine, and they can tell if your engine is high quality or not. They come up with a real-time price in their engine of what that car is worth. They show it to the seller. Okay? They say, that's the price of your car, the real value of your car. We'll give you 10% less than that price right now in cash. Seller goes, here. Then when somebody wants to buy a car, they go, here's the price, we'll charge you 10% more than that price. So this transparent pricing model plus the thing cuts out all the middlemen. In 7 years, they captured 80% of the used car market in China. Okay? They sell 2 million cars a month. So think about that. They went from zero. And used cars is not like some gaming Silicon Valley digital environment. This is physical, traditional, very fragmented, and they captured 80% of the market. That's what's possible today if you can have the mentality and the structure to build an exponential organization. Now, when you look to Web3, most of the NFT projects that we see are EXOs. They've built a community. They use many of the attributes. Look at the Bored Ape Yacht Club. That's my Bored Ape, by the way.
That's what it looks like a little bit.
It does, kind of dopey, a little bit sleep deprived, but trying to be of service. There's a service costume there, right? This thing went from 0 to $1 billion market cap in less than a year, and it continues on this pace. So we're going to see an explosion of this, and we'll talk more about that going forward. And so with the rise of what we call the exponential organization, operating at this speed, we declare Coase's law obsolete. Okay? And this is a dangerous thing to say about a Nobel Prize winner, but basically the time when he formulated this law, today transaction costs are lower outside than inside. When you're trying to do something in a small environment, you don't suffer from the immune system. You don't have to answer the legal and branding and HR and privacy about why are you doing that thing. I'll give you a really clear example of this that brought this home. When I was at Yahoo, I was the head of innovation running their incubator. When we tried to launch a new feature on say, Yahoo Personals, it took about 8 months to get the feature live. You develop it, systems testing, integration testing, brand testing, security testing, privacy testing, et cetera, about 8 months. MySpace was roughly similar. Zuckerberg is building Facebook, and he said to his developers, if you think your code is ready, take it live on the live site. Developers are like, are you kidding? You actually trust us and you give us autonomy? But your code better be right, otherwise you're fired if you take down the live site. So they were rolling out a feature a week at Facebook. And so that's why they blew past Yahoo, MySpace, even Google in this model. So there's some characteristics about exponential organizations, and we summarize it overall in the diagram of a brain. Okay? My original co-authors, Yuri Van Geest and Michiel Sherman and Mike Malone, we put this model together, basically tagging what was going on. There's the massive transformative purpose, there's 5 externalities, and the 5 internal mechanisms. So let's now get into the model of the characteristics of an exponential organization. The first and most important is the massive transformative purpose. And Peter, why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, fantastic. I love this. At the end of the day, doing anything big and bold in the world is hard work, right? If you're trying to make a dent in the universe, and you need to be driven with clarity and emotion. So I want to talk about the attributes of an MTP. And we're going to hear over and over again, this is the first step for you in building your exponential organization or retooling your existing company. You know, an MTP, it's massive. It inspires you. It inspires your team. You're proud to be doing this. It's about taking humanity to Mars. It's about reinventing the ecosystem. It's about doing whatever you want. At the end of the day, it really has to be driven by an emotional energy. It could be a positive emotional energy like awe and like excitement. So my early MTPs were about space, and space was an awe-inspiring. It could be about pain, something that's going on that should not be going on, right? So my current MTP in the work that I'm doing is really about reinventing the healthcare industry because it's failing us over and over again. Other attributes, you need to be willing to commit a decade to this. So at the end of the day, you might think that some of these billion-dollar startups are overnight successes, but they're really overnight successes after 11 years of hard work. So you got to commit to it for the long run. Third, it gives you focus, a target to shoot for, right? Without a target, you'll miss it every time. This is an organizing principle for you, your organization, your team. Really important. This is not, an MTP is not something you heard someone else say. It's something that comes from your heart and soul as the founder or founders of the organization. It has to feel true and authentic. Be able to shout it from the mountaintops and feel it, right? Wake you up in the morning, so to speak. And finally, it needs to be relatively brief, easy to remember and recite so that every member of your team knows it. In fact, ideally, your community and crowd know this. They know what you stand for, what your company stands for. So here's a few examples of some MTPs. Organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. That one is? Google's, yes. To revolutionize space technology with the ultimate goal of enabling people to live on other planets. That's SpaceX. To incentivize and accelerate radical breakthroughs towards an equitable and abundant future for humanity. That is the X Prize. To support entrepreneurs to positively impact the lives of 1 billion plus people. That's our dear family at Singularity University. And Ideas Worth Spreading is TED. So these are MTPs. For me, it's a bit of a formula of the actions you want to take and the group you want to serve. Let me share mine, and it drives what I'm doing at Abundance 360 and X Prize to inspire and guide entrepreneurs to create a hopeful and abundant future for humanity. I say this every morning in the shower. I say this through the day. My team knows it. Everyone who works with me knows it. It drives me. It inspires me. Salim, yours?
Mine is to transform civilization.
It's kind of a simple, small.
It's a niche project. This actually came from my dad. I did a TEDx talk called Fixing Civilization, basically talking about that immune system problem. And my dad heard about this talk. And he's 90 years old. And he goes, totally disagree with your talk. I'm like, what do you mean? Don't you think we need to fix civilization? And he goes, yeah, of course we do. But that's not the problem. The problem is not the fixing part. It's the civilization part. And he said, we've not civilized the world. We've materialized the world. Now we have to do the work to civilize the world. And wisdom bomb from the elders, right? And so that's fundamentally the work that we have to do. Because if you think about how we operate globally, geopolitics and companies, et cetera, we're basically scaling tribal thinking. Facebook groups, et cetera. Now we have to figure out how to transcend past all of that if we're going to take our civilization to the next level. So that's what I'm passionate about.
Let me come back to why an MTP. It might be obvious to you, but it's important to hit these. The first is a powerful enough MTP. It's the power of pull. It's so inspirational. You form a community around you, right? It brings people to you who want to say, I want to be involved with that. And now, today, in 2023, 2024, more than ever, people want significance in their life. They want to know that the work they're doing amounts to something. It's not just about the dollar. Second, an MTP helps you attract and retain that talent. They want to be there on that 10-year mission with you. 3, it changes the organizational focus from internal politics to external impact. Like, stop arguing about that. We are going to go and transform the world in this fashion.
Can I interject for a second?
Of course.
So if you think about any big company, 99% of the conversation in the company is about what's happening inside the company. Almost zero is about what's happening out in the world. And the MTP forces an organization to look outward and instead of focusing on internal politics. And so that's one of the kind of impedance mismatches between big companies and EXOs.
Fantastic. Let me go to number 4 here. Listen, we're living in a world of extraordinary opportunity. I don't know how if you feel like I do. I call it, drowning in abundance or death by abundance. It's like there's more deals, more opportunities, more startups, more investments than ever before. So how do you know what to focus on? Well, having a clear MTP during this abundance of opportunity and periods of rapid growth allows you and your leadership team and your company to really focus on things that are important. The 5th benefit of an MTP, which I'm excited to share, is that it sets you up for a moonshot. And we'll talk a little bit about moonshots in context here, but this is the graphic that I use. An MTP is a canvas, right? So my early MTP coming out of college, when my first 20 years as an entrepreneur in the space world, was to irreversibly and privately open the space frontier to make humanity a multi-planet species. And so that's what I cared about. That was the filter with which I saw the world. And so my first moonshot was to build a international space university. It took the better part of a decade with Todd Hawley and Bob Richards, but we built what is now the leading institution based in Strasbourg, France. And that was very clearly, we had a very clear moonshot target. This is what we want to accomplish by this date. This is what it looked like. And then the second MTP, the second moonshot I took in this area was around opening up private human spaceflight. And this was the first X Prize. Create a $10 million spaceflight incentive prize to stimulate technology and investments. And that launched the private spaceflight revolution. But those were very specific projects with targets and dates on the canvas of my MTP. And hopefully that clears up the relationship between MTP and moonshots. Let me mention that sometimes it's not the easiest thing to develop your MTP and your moonshot. Kudos to my chief AI officer, Steve Brown, who built this free AI engine. You can go to moonshotplanner.com and it will step you through developing your MTP, work with you, brainstorm with you. It's a generative AI model, and then ultimately taking it to planning and building out your moonshot.
Awesome.
Let's go to the framework.
Well, I want to mention a couple of things. So, when we looked at the hundreds of unicorns to tease out the EXO model, we found that every single one of them had an MTP. So we consider that kind of like the spiritual, what fundamental problem are you trying to solve? And I love Peter's framing around it. It's something that you're willing to put a decade towards. I remember Dan Sullivan of Strategic Coach, who's one of your dear friends, offered free coaching to certain entrepreneurs. I'm like, wow, what does it take to be in your little program? He goes, you have to commit to that one company or problem for 25 years. Then I know you're dedicated, right? So if you're willing to commit 25 years to one problem or 10 years to one problem, that's an MTP. That means you're willing to, I want to cure cancer. The founders of Waze were like, we're going to solve traffic because it's a nightmare around the world. And it doesn't have to be this way. And so whatever it is for you, what do you wake up in the morning at 6 a.m. every morning going, well, I would solve that if I could. One more way to think about it is if somebody gave you $1 billion, what problem would you solve with that $1 billion? Right? So
we'll talk about that. And all of that is, you can find that in your moonshot planner. Like, what do you want to do when you were a kid before your parents or teachers told you that wasn't a job to have? And by the way, they're probably maybe right back then, but not now.
Yeah. We're getting a note that there's thousands of people online with the chat streams going nuts. If you want to kind of participate constructively, please go to Slido and upvote questions on there. It'll be much easier to manage and organize the abundance of viewers that we have. Just talking about that for a second, think about this idea. For 10,000 years, every business in the world was focused on scarcity, right? Like if you didn't have scarcity, you didn't have a business. And today, we have abundance of energy, of clean water, of healthcare, of education. Your seminal book, Abundance, nailed all of this. And one way we talk about EXOs is they found business models around abundance. So Uber has found a way of tapping into an abundance of empty cars lying around. Airbnb tapping into extra bedrooms lying empty. And so where is there latent abundance that you can then, with the fundamental passion that you have, take it up and light it up using the 6Ds model?
Yeah, amazing. Let's jump into the EXO framework, in particular, the external attributes here.
Sure. So, you see the brain diagram, and on the right, you see 5 externalities that map to the acronym SCALE. And leveraging one or more allows you to keep a very small resource footprint and scale very fast from there. And so we're going to cover the characteristics of these attributes now. And then we're going to go to a Q&A session, so get your questions ready. Right? The first of these is staff on demand. The poster child of this is Uber. Right? As much as possible, don't hire your own employees because you have to manage people, et cetera, et cetera. Hire independent contractors, or there are platforms that allow you to do this. And not to pick on Marriott again, but when the pandemic hit, Marriott has 45,000 people in thousands of properties around the world, had to lay off 50% of their staff. It was a nightmare. All the lives and families that got disrupted with that. Airbnb, because they used the staff on demand model, the hosts are independent, basically laid off 2,000 people and kept right on trucking and moved ahead with very minimal disruption. We found during the pandemic that in the top 10 versus bottom 10 of the Fortune 100, the top 10 did 5 times better than the bottom 10 because of the inherent flexibility built into that. So staff on demand is the first of these. There's a bunch of examples. Amazon's Mechanical Turk allows you to take any task and farm it out to a large number of people. You have platforms like TaskRabbit or GigWalk or Fiverr where you can hire people to get things done. There's an amazing company called MBO Partners. And what they do is if you're a big company, you have maybe 3-4% contractors, independent contractors. We think that ratio should be about 30% because you need that resilience, flexibility. And MBO helps you manage all those contractors, onboarding, offboarding, training, background checks, et cetera, so they can help you drop the cost radically. So there's all these companies, platforms or companies that can help you manage your staff on demand. From 2005 to 2015, 94% of new jobs in the US were in the gig economy. Okay? So the overall economy is shifting to that. Reid Hoffman wrote this book called The Startup of You, basically saying everybody will end up managing themselves as an independent contractor. So that's the staff on demand, the first characteristic. The next one is community and crowd. And Peter, why don't you talk about that?
Sure. So we're spelling out the acronym SCALE here. Here's your C. In this world of 8 billion people, we are connecting the entire planet at gigabit connection speeds, from 5G networks to Starlink. And your ability as an exponential entrepreneur to build a community around you that becomes your source of ideas, your source of customers, your source of quality checking is extraordinary, more than ever before. So at the core is your core team, right? These will probably be your founders, your employees, your personal network. Around that core team is your customers and alumni. You have a direct relationship, right? This is not the crowd. This is part of your community. You have a direct relationship with those individuals. Directly around the customers and alumni, you've got your vendors, your fans, your partners. One step removed, but still a direct relationship with those individuals. Around them is staff on demand. These are individuals, as we just discussed, that you can pull in to work for you for a period of time and support you in a multitude of different ways. And then everybody else outside of that is the crowd. And this model, one of the most powerful things you can do today is build a vibrant community. I mean, that's what we're doing right now with you, pulling people into the EXO community and the Abundance 360 community, the Singularity community. Our mission is to build a relationship with you so we can go and do great things together. Now, lots of different models out there of companies that do this. Of course, TED, anybody who's been on stage is part of that core, but then anybody who is in the audience, anyone who is watching the videos and uploading the videos and sharing the videos is part of TED's community. The X Prize Foundation, very proud, is 29 years now since the company started.
Wow, 29 years.
Crazy.
Well, you've beaten Dan Sullivan's 25 years. So
yeah, well, I have and will. So the X Prize goes out to the world, and it says, here is a grand challenge, right? We have this $100 million X Prize out there funded by Elon Musk. to do gigaton carbon removal. We just launched an X Prize asking teams around the world to detect and autonomously put out a wildfire within 10 minutes of its ignition. Right? Palmer Luckey, the founder of Oculus, was the first person to register as a team. So what we do is around that challenge, around that, call it that massive transformative purpose of that X Prize concept, we form community. And those communities are teams competing for it. It's fans supporting it. It's funders supporting it. All of that is built around that core MTP of that X Prize. Wikipedia, of course, amazing what Wikipedia has been able to pull off.
I mean, think about Wikipedia. The world's information right now sits inside this basic website. One of my favorite examples of community is the Chinese company Xiaomi, which is the second largest phone company in China.
Out of no place. I went and met with the leadership team. They're extraordinary what they built.
It's amazing. And how have they done it? They're the second largest. They do no PR, no product development, no marketing costs at all. They have a community of 1,000 super users. And what they do is they say to those super users, you guys vote on what features you want to see in the new phone. And then those super users get to get the phone a few months early and can boast to their friends, here's the new phone, and look, I voted for this feature. And the word of mouth of that is so powerful, and the community of super users is so powerful that they can completely run their entire company with no PR, marketing, or product.
I mean, you used to pay millions for all the experts and all of the, that support. Now you get it for free from an authentic level of energy.
If you can properly use community, then you can use it for marketing, product development, training,
Q&A.
also hiring, right? Because if they're passionate about you, that's the best place to find new team members, et cetera. So it's incredibly powerful. Most EXOs going forward are operating with building community first. Note that most of the biggest companies in the world are terrible at community, right? And so this is a huge arbitrage opportunity there.
By the way, we see your questions coming in. Please upvote them as well. We'll be going to questions very shortly.
So the next section after community and crowd to kind of navigate and harness all of that is AI and algorithms. And Peter, take us through AI and algorithms, the most dominant thing happening in the world today.
It is. It's the most exciting, and hopefully you're playing with it. And the most important thing I can say is go and play. This is a great quote from Kevin Kelly, founding editor of Wired. He said, the next 10,000 business plans will be for an entrepreneur to take a domain and add AI to it. This happened, by the way, 100 years ago when the dominant new breakthrough was electricity. And electricity was being added to the drill, the mechanical drill, or the mechanical washer or dishwasher. It's happening once again. So I want to share a few basics here, which is why is AI exploding now? The idea of AI began at a conference in 1956 at Dartmouth, 67 years ago. So why now? Well, there are 4 reasons. It's important for you to know them because they're going to give you a path of where things are going. The first reason is computational power. Here we see 50+ years of Moore's Law, not slowing down. The death of Moore's Law has been predicted so many times. But in the last 5 years, we've had a tipping point in enough computational power to run these neural networks, these deep learning networks. The second reason is the amount of structured data out there. These large language models are being trained on all of the data that we've produced, and we're doubling the amount of data year on year. It's every tweet, every Facebook post, everything online. And that data is allowing these large language models to learn and anticipate what is next, right? They're learning from us. Third, really important, is that the algorithms are becoming much more efficient. Over the last 5 years, the price of training an AI algorithm has gone down 99.5%. And the fourth reason, no surprise, is the massive amount of capital going in. These investments are not slowing down, they're accelerating. And so with those 4 attributes, we're just driving better and better, more and more AI. A couple of quotes here. Sundar Pichai said it best. He said, AI could have more profound implications for humanity than electricity or fire. I believe that. Elon made it a little bit punchier. He said companies are going to race to build AI or you'll be made uncompetitive. Essentially, if your competitor is racing to build AI, they will crush you. This is the way I phrase it, and I truly believe it. There are going to be two kinds of companies at the end of this decade: those that are fully utilizing AI and those that are out of business. So why? Why is this so important? Well, we're living in this tsunami of data, right? Autonomous cars with LiDARs and imaging. We're in a trillion sensor economy where you can know anything you want, anytime you want. And a competitor is able to harness that data, create algorithms, and get insights is way ahead of you. So how do you keep track of all of this? Well, one of the things I talked about at Abundance 360 this year, and all of the companies I'm chairman, vice chairman, or an investor in, I'm saying, listen, you need a chief AI officer. You see that guy down at the bottom at the tsunami coming your way? It's not someone who's coding large language models for you, but it's an individual, a strategic advisor to the CEO who understands the field, sees what's going on, where the directions are, is able to advise you in that regard. Let me go to a video from a dear friend of both of ours, Imad Mustaq. Imad is the CEO of Stability AI. I just had him recently on my podcast, Moonshots and Mindsets. Let's take a listen to Imad.
Look at creative industry. Video games, $180 billion a year. Disney spends $10 billion a year. Amazon, $16 billion a year on content. All of that's going to change in the next couple of years alone, just from one tiny little 2 gigabyte file. Industry is about, again, information theory.
Yeah.
And so once you can basically take a system, you can have human input in the loop to train a system that's a generalist to understand principles. You disrupt just about everything.
What's your advice to that 20-year-old listening right now?
Drop everything. We should focus entirely on this. $100 billion, $1 trillion is going to go into this sector.
Say that again, how much?
$100 billion in the next few years, and then $1 trillion will go into this sector because it's so transformative and so few people understand it. There's never been something, a technological advance, that will diffuse as fast as this.
But what does it look like to focus? What would a person do?
Like, if you're an entrepreneur, you'd be an entrepreneur in this. If you are someone who can communicate, you communicate this to other people, and you get paid $1 million a year as a consultant, right?
If you're an artist, if you're creative,
if you're an
use
artist,
the tool.
you become the most efficient artist in the world. Corporations, the big programs, the big things, will be outcompeted by just individuals and small groups. Building on top of this technology can do anything.
All right, let's go next to leverage and shared assets. Over to you, Salim.
Yeah, so the starting point of EXOs was really, as I mentioned, when Amazon Web Services was launched, because then you could leverage the computing power that Amazon offered and go to that model. And there's hundreds of types of this. The sharing economy sits inside this category, right? Outsourcing, leveraging cars like Getaround or Turo does, or Rent the Runway, opening up data sets, making those available. Fractional ownership of both IP and real estate are both aspects of leveraging other people's assets. So I think you should be leveraging another asset, or if you have one, make it available for others to leverage.
Which makes you a platform.
Which then makes you a platform. And we'll talk about how do you build a platform in a bit. But this is...
Small business owners don't always have time for cybersecurity. That's why the Google tools they use every day are secure by default. You built it. We'll help you defend it.
It's a huge environment. Think about Waze, how explosive that was. Why? Because they leveraged the GPS on your phone to gather the location data, as opposed to Nokia buying Navtech, which owned the traffic circle sensors in all the roadways. That doesn't scale, right? And so this incredible, talk about Lab Central, the biotech lab.
Yeah, so if you're a biotech startup, you have so many requirements, and it's so difficult to get all the approvals. So what a very enterprising entrepreneur did is he bought large lab facilities, and he rented it out by the lab bench. So you could be an entrepreneur of one and have access to all of the equipment you possibly could want and get going. We can see that in other industries as well.
Yeah, people like Mark Hatch created lab spaces and fab labs around the world where people can share that, right? The Little Gadget Square, which is now a multi-billion-dollar company, was built at a fab lab. So you don't have to make the investment in all that equipment, et cetera, up front. So incredible capability to leverage other people's assets to then build your EXO. Okay? The next piece, the final E in scale, is engagement. And Peter, talk us through that.
Sure. So engagement is about how do you engage the crowd to make a community, and how do you engage your community to keep it sticky and together. So Incentive Prizes is a great way to turn crowd into community. We do this X Prize all the time. We put out this challenge, and those who connect with that challenge, with the MTP of that challenge, join in, form a team, support a team, and they go from the crowd to community. Gamification is how you make it sticky, right? Token economics is blowing this all up. One of my fraternity brothers, Michael Saylor, who runs MicroStrategies, just announced something called MicroStrategies Lightning Rewards. What are they doing? Everybody inside your company gets a wallet, and when your employee behaves well, meaning they show up on time to the meeting, or they watched that particular training video, or they went and did whatever, they get Satoshis in their wallet. So you're literally connecting a direct connection of monetizing the behavior that you want. They call it MicroStrategy Lightning Rewards. I want to go to a dear friend of both of ours, Eric Poulier, who is the CEO of Vadim, and one of the most extraordinary companies on engagement. Let's take it away, Eric.
Thanks, Peter. I think a good way to think about engagement right now is this confluence of exponential technologies that have come together to transform the very nature of how we think about engaging our internal constituents and our external customers. Take a look at Pepsi, for instance. For the World Cup this year in Qatar, they actually printed 200 million QR codes on bags of potato chips, other snacks. When people scanned those potato chips, they didn't go to an app. Instead, they went to a Web3 wallet and in-dropped a smart NFT, not for speculation, but for engagement. It said, share, take a selfie and share, and then your face became part of this massive soccer ball. The end result was an ongoing direct conduit of communication between the brand and the consumer. They had hundreds of thousands of people that willingly, happily gave first-party data. That's the holy grail of next-generation engagement. Gave that first-party data and said, okay, what else do you have for me? Pepsi then ended up with hundreds of thousands of people they can then talk to on an ongoing basis. Another good example, State Farm. State Farm put out over 1 million digital footballs into augmented reality. People went around chasing them all over the United States. And when they got them, they got all sorts of prizes. These things were redeemables and collectibles. They turned into NFTs, but they also turned into, again, first-party data, legally and ethically collected, that they could then turn into ongoing long-term relationships. Amazing examples for the next generation of engagement. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Eric. One of the most extraordinary platforms of engagement that you wrote about and Eric also loves is that Talysis platform.
Yeah, let me mention this for a second. So Yukai Chao, who's a PhD out of Berkeley in gamification, put this framework together. And if you see the slides, what he did was he identified 8 major human motivations, like empowerment and epic meaning and ownership. And then 4 white hat positive ones and 4 negative ones: fear of missing out, unpredictability, avoidance, etc. And these are like a Maslow's hierarchy almost of major human motivations. Then he identified 150 plus game dynamics like leaderboards, progress bars, Easter eggs, and mapped them to these motivations. So if you have a community and you want to inspire more social influence, you do one of those things. If you want to do more scarcity, then you implement one of those things. If you want to do social inclusion, then you put in leaderboards and progress bars. And so he's mapped all of these. So now we have, for the first time ever, a completely prescriptive model for human engagement that should be embedded into any product or service going forward. And what we predict is EXOs now will be building out using this model. So for example, take most of the blockchains. They've exploded out of the gate by taking community, adding crypto economics and this engagement model, and totally getting $10, $20 billion market cap out of nothing. And half the world, most of the world has never even heard of them. The most famous example of Octalysis being embedded into a product is Duolingo, where they've embedded all of the capabilities around it. And Peter, you talked about some of this, these engagement models also, right? But all of these are operating this. Gary Vaynerchuk with VFriends has created a whole community around these, and the people are trading these NFTs. So the Web3 world is connecting into this and naturally using all of these pretty aggressively. So that was the 5 attributes of this. And I want to touch on one last piece of engagement. Sorry, I forgot one thing. If we can go back to the slides for a second. I've been talking to the C-suite of a bunch of CPG companies, and what we've been saying to them is the future of brands is going to be an MTP to give you purpose to that brand. Octalis has type engagement models to give you a prescriptive way of engaging with the customers, and an NFT architecture at the back end. Why? Because that gives you a permanent cookie that's programmable, and you can route around all the Web 2, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram gatekeepers, and have direct relationship with your customers. So this is our view of the future of all brands going forward. And we think this will become incredibly profound over time. In fact, to go back a bit, in 2015, Paul Pullman, who was the CEO of Unilever, had me come into his top 200 executives. He then ordered every brand in Unilever to take on an MTP. Okay? 4.5 years later, the 5 most profitable brands in Unilever are the ones that have adopted the model the most. So we can start to see the model bite, but now we're going to see all brands go down this path with this NFT endpoint in different ways. So that gave you a summary overall of the 5 scale attributes. Let's go to Q&A.
Remember, please, there's a QR code for you to get access to Slido. Let's put that code up one more time. You may want to scan it. We're going to be using this over the next couple of Q&A sessions. But we have your questions teed up, the ones that are most upvoted. Let's begin.
Okay. So Peter Bailey is asking, where and how do micro, small, and medium-sized businesses find their space in the EXO paradigm? So the smaller, the better in a sense, and they actually adapt more naturally. Think about the biggest companies in the world today: Apple, Facebook, Microsoft, Google, all started out as small startups, adopted these characteristics over time, and boom, they're the biggest companies in the world. I mentioned already Mercado Libre out of Argentina. The biggest companies in the world in the next decade are going to be EXOs. They already are for the most part. So, but small companies can adopt this model much more effectively than bigger companies because there's no immune system. You can jump to these new models. If you think about most business school thinking, right, in the US or Europe or Japan, we've learned 50 years of Harvard MBA thinking. We have to unlearn all of that and then relearn these new models, whereas emerging markets, small companies are much more flexible and risk accommodating. They can take, small teams can take on more risk. You talk about all that time. And therefore, small teams are much more adaptable to EXOs than large companies.
All right, let's go to the next question here. Arvind says, how does one protect downside while building EXOs?
So here, if you're building an EXO, notice we said that you can have a very small resource footprint and then use staff on demand or leveraging other people's assets so that your risk profile is very, very low. You can put much less capital at risk, right? Talk about the cost of running a company or building a company. Yeah, you've been tracking some of that.
If you go back 20 years, if you were starting a tech company, it was on the order of $5 million for the servers, for the software, for the landlines, for the access to bandwidth, for all of that. That has dropped down orders of magnitude to the point where you can start the equivalent company today for $500. And what we're seeing in particular is with the generative AI world is that entrepreneurs are starting new generative AI-based EXOs with $0. It's based on evening and weekend time because you have access to everything you need effectively for free. So it's an extraordinary time.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the next question here.
Well, actually, you have one of your interns is building like...
Oh my God, yeah. One of my, Andre, when he joined as one of my junior strike force members, I said, so are you playing with generative AI? And he says, yeah, I've got 3 startups. I was like, it blew me away.
All right, next question. Lucas is asking, when you have less financial capability, is it better to team up with investors to grow an idea or better to test while small and bootstrap? 100% our bias is to test while small and bootstrap. The more you can de-risk it, the more value you create, and the less dilution you take when you bring investors on board.
Also, as soon as you bring investors on board, you become risk averse because you've made promises. Your ability to be agile and to switch to a new idea. Remember, it's not what you think is right, it's what the data is showing you. And how many companies out there started in one area, had an amazing team, passion, had a vision, an MTP, but what they exactly did shifted as they learned more and more. And sometimes your investors will be sort of a lead keel and an anchor. If you're bringing in investors, make sure that they're backing you in particular, not your idea.
There's 3 kind of market things. One is the technology risk. the market risk, and the execution risk. So investors look at those three. Okay. Today, almost everything comes down to team risk. How cohesive is the team when you inevitably go through the pivots and right turns to kind of navigate success? And investors are typically betting on that. The more you can make those right-hand turns and find your sweet spot, ideally you get to product market fit before doing that. And we'll talk more about this when we talk about building an EXO. So let's go to the next question.
Mick Lee, thank you for your question. Do you see a need for a change of the social contract between workers and organizations?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I mentioned that statistic, right? I'll repeat this. 2005 to 2015, 94% of new jobs in the US were in the gig economy. So this totally breaks pension planning, unemployment benefits, retirement plans, all of that, healthcare benefits, et cetera. So you need platforms like, say, MBO partners that will handle some of that for you and handle that social contract so that you can focus on just the gig economy, et cetera. When you have a platform like that, or Fiverr, or Upwork, et cetera, it allows you to focus on the work that you love doing the most, right? So most people in the gig economy are doing that work because they really want to rather than not. Can I tell a funny story about Uber? Okay. So a few years ago, one of our alumni in France said, hey, can I talk to you? I've got a meeting with the finance minister in France. I'd love your help. I said, okay, what's the meeting about? He was like, well, he wants to know how to shut down Uber. I'm like, what? He goes, can't stand these independent contractors doing their thing, et cetera. And he wants to shut it down because the taxis go on strike, the airport goes on strike, and then the president yells at the finance minister. So we did like 10 minutes of research, and we found the most amazing anecdote. Outside Paris, you have the suburbs called the banlieue, which is full of North African immigrants. It's like South Central LA in the 80s. If you go in, you may not come back out. Drugs, gangs, the whole lot. The French government has spent $40 billion trying to solve that problem, okay, over the decades. Uber comes in. In 18 months, the crime rate drops by 10 times. Why? Because they're all out driving. Okay? Because the labor liquidity offered by a gig economy like Uber or any of these others makes it so that anybody can go work when they have the time. A single mother can drop their child off at school, drive for a few hours, come back and make a viable living. That is the future that we're going to be living into. And the platforms that support that, and note that most big companies don't still, that's where we're going to go. Today, most big companies have about 3 to 4% independent contractors. We think that's going to grow to about 30%.
All right, let's go to some more, squeeze a few more questions here. Max says, is it a good idea to start an EXO that uses large language models to ask what a user wants to do in life, then maps a career path, daily tasks toward goal completion? So, Max, we're going to be talking about the steps for creating an EXO. It begins with having a massive transformative purpose, an MTP, and then you're going to pull in the tools that you need to use to achieve that MTP. Listen, large language models are a tool usable across the board, but I wouldn't start with a shiny widget and build a company around that. What is the problem you want to solve?
Yeah, you should focus on your MTP and then figure this out. Let me just touch on this. This is really, really important. We'll touch on this more in the building an EXO segment. But the traditional model was find a great idea and then try and push it into the marketplace, right? And we recommend strongly that you start with an MTP and then find the technology, skills, capabilities that will satisfy that.
Because the technologies are changing all the time, but your MTP, the problem you want to solve, until you solve it, is going to be there for a while. All right, let's go to the next question here. Adam asks, clean energy, solar panels, batteries, is showing exponential growth over long term. How does this fit within the EXO construct and approaches? So listen, solar and fusion and wind are technologies. The EXO construct here is really about what kind of a company you're going to build and who you're going to serve around that.
But note that you are correct, Adam. There's unbelievable potential happening. Why? Because solar energy is on a doubling pattern. It's doubling every 22 months. Okay? And by the way, it's been doing this for 40 years. So at this pace, we will be able to deliver the entire world's energy needs in 4 doublings. We're like 8 years away.
Yeah, 50% of the U.S. solar new energy is 50% of all electric new energy on the grid this year in 2023 is from solar.
Lithium-ion batteries have dropped 90% in cost over the last 10 years. And what Elon Musk, I'm going to touch on this. This is the fundamental trends that are exponential, when you build a company on an exponential trend, say drones that are doubling every 9 months, that your company will grow along with the underlying technology, right? When Jeff Bezos was scanning around to start a company, he noticed the internet was going 2,300% a year. So he said, all right, I'm just going to sell books over the internet. And the bookstore grew 2,300% a year along with that. So you really want to piggyback these exponential trends and build a company, but start with the MTP.
Let's go to Paco here for one last question before we go to our next segment. How to include 10x social and environmental exponential impact, as well as 10x growth in the EXO model?
So this should be taken care of by the MTP. If you have an MTP, right, of solving transportation, like Elon or others, basically the social and environmental aspects are built into that MTP. Okay? By definition, you're a very ethical company. You're trying to do good in the world. You're trying to solve a fundamental problem. If you have a negative MTP, or your MTP is not inspirational enough or contributory enough to solving some of the big problems, you won't attract a community. And if you don't attract community, then you can't scale very effectively. So it all starts with the MTP.
All right, we're going to go into our internal attributes. We've got 5 internal attributes.
So the scale elements, which are the externalities, allow you to keep a small feature footprint and scale very quickly, right? These 5 internal mechanisms allow you to manage the control framework and drive culture in your exponential organization. So let's cover these. Peter, why don't you start with interfaces?
Sure. So interfaces, you can think of them as APIs as well. If you're a rapidly growing organization and you're bringing on customers, you're bringing on community, there's no way that humans enable you to scale at the rate of thousands, tens of thousands, millions. You need to automate that, really, and that is your interface. Those are your APIs. These allow you to scale your organization. They also allow you to turn your organization into a platform. Right, one of the platforms I loved was when Chad Hurley created YouTube and enabled, it was at the intersection of all these exponentials, cheap memory, cheap smartphones, high bandwidth internet, and allowed anybody to upload and then to monetize that. Uber is the poster child once again of these interfaces. It's the interface with me as a customer when I'm calling up Uber, Uber Eats, whatever it might be, and interfaces with the drivers. It's that agility that enables that. The App Store, Steve Jobs created this App Store on top of a smartphone, making it accessible to anybody. I've spoken about in the past something called a user interface moment. A user interface moment, I look for these moments, really important. Please pay attention here. When you've got a very complex infrastructure like the ARPANET, right, the predecessor to the internet, which very few people could use. Here comes Mark Andreessen, and he creates Mosaic. And Mosaic is a user interface moment on top of ARPANET, allowing anybody to build websites and utilize this backbone of connectivity. And then all of a sudden, boom, the World Wide Web explodes. Coinbase is a user interface moment, allowing any of us to buy and transact very easily these cryptocurrencies. And then the other best example right now, we're living through it, is ChatGPT. It is very much a user interface moment, allowing us to utilize large language models extremely easily.
2 things about this, right? Note that all platform businesses use interfaces, okay? And basically you want to automate the supply side and the demand side. So think about Google Ads. They've automated the buying of ads and the selling of ads, and therefore they can scale effortlessly. Same with Uber. The interface between Uber and its drivers is actually a form of intellectual property. So we think this is the most under-recognized element in business today, are the interfaces between your company and the outside and how you automate those. We think there's going to be books written about the future of interfaces to manage and navigate. If you can automate the interface, which is automating one of the scale elements, right? So XPRIZE, when we run teams, et cetera, the more you can automate the interaction with the teams,
if I'm an entrepreneur right now, I'd be looking to build a platform.
Yeah, so super critical interfaces to deal with this. All right, next one is dashboards.
Over to you.
Okay, so dashboards are critical because if you're building an EXO and things are going wrong, or things are going right, you want to know as fast as possible. There are two pieces and two sides of dashboards. One is the external dashboards, which is the real-time engagement metrics that your organization is tracking. And on the inside, OKRs, or what stands for objectives and key results. Okay? So if I go up a level, almost every Silicon Valley company uses OKRs to manage the control framework, performance management, team and individual performance. Google has taken it to an extra step by making their OKR system completely transparent. So if I'm an employee, I can look up anybody else's past performance and what they're currently working on to see is it worth collaborating with them, etc. On the external side, companies are tracking, for example, Focus at Will, which streams music to put your brain in an alpha state, publishes to all the stakeholders the current number of free users, paid users, the churn, the average revenue rate, the monthly revenue rate, and publishes like 30 statistics that operate in real time. So these two components are absolutely critical. They're the headlights that keep you seeing if you're on the road or not as you head towards your MTP. Let's take a negative example of WeWork. Okay? WeWork didn't have adequate dashboards and didn't realize they were losing money every time they opened an office. And what they did was they scaled the company and lost money on every transaction. So they scaled their losses. Okay? So you really want to get your unit metrics right before you scale, which is also called product market fit, etc. And dashboards are absolutely critical for all of that. Okay? Next one is experimentation. Peter, talk us through that one.
Sure. So there are two principal elements in experimentation. And to a large degree, this is a culture that you need to build into your company from the beginning. The most successful companies are data-driven, founder-led, experimental companies, companies that it's their second nature to run experiments constantly. Part of this is lean startup thinking, and the other is creating a culture of risk. And in a lot of nations around the world, failure is a death sentence, and that's a problem. Ultimately, one of the benefits of the Silicon Valley mentality is if I fail, that means I've learned and I'm likely not to make that mistake again. You need to be building a learning organization. A couple of fun quotes. This is yours, Salim. It says, experimentation eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah, we used to say culture eats strategy for breakfast, but I rename it and I go experimentation eats culture for breakfast. And yours is?
Yeah, overcoming the tyranny of confidence. And this is the old world, right? In the old world, you had the expert, the graybeard, who said, well, this is the way we've done it, and I'm super confident. And that tyranny of confidence can destroy you, right? The day before something truly is a breakthrough, it's a crazy idea. And if you're confident in the old way of thinking, or if you're an expert who can tell you exactly how it can't be done, you're stuck. That diagram you see on the right-hand side there really is about a rapid experimentation cycle. You know, the king of experimentation has truly been Amazon. I love a quote from Jeff Bezos who goes, our success is a function of the number of experiments we run per day, per week, per year, right? And they built an entire organization around that. So data-driven, founder-led, experimental organizations, so hypercritical. Let me just show
two quick things.
Yeah, sure.
One is, because the world is changing all the time, you have to be running nonstop experiments to be the sense-making of this, right? So your strategy is done. There's no way of formulating strategy in today's world because the world is changing so fast. The best strategy in the world failed when the pandemic hit. You could have the best strategy as a technology company until ChatGPT launched. So you have to be constantly running experiments with sense-making. Let's take the example of Eric Yuan, who was building WebEx for Cisco. He wanted to try a bunch of things with WebEx, and Cisco wouldn't let him. So he went outside, built Zoom, and boom, we have the world's most popular video interface. Why? Because he wanted to experiment. The big company wouldn't let him, and look at the result as a response.
An amazing individual, friend, Astro Teller. He is the captain of moonshots at Alphabet, at X. Let me share a short video here. And the important thing that's important to note is if you're going to experiment a lot, you're going to fail a lot. And if you don't have a tolerance for failure in your organization, you're going to fall apart. All right, let's listen to Astro Teller.
We need people to become lifelong learners. And the number one reason that we aren't lifelong learners is because you don't learn from confirmation bias. You learn when you're wrong. Failure is the only meaningful mechanism for improvement. And yet it's the thing we avoid. It's the ultimate no-no. So if you want your team to be obsessed with learning, which I believe is the only way to be obsessed with winning, then they need to find failure to be something they can say with active pride.
That's experimentation, and it's really hard. It's against human nature for us to be tolerant of failure. But if you're going to be experimenting, you have to be holding out for that pearl. That is that aha moment. And in the book, and by the way, there is so much we're throwing at you right now. All of this is in the book.
Yeah, so remember the book, we made it free for anybody that wants to go read the book in this webinar, and then 99 cents for this first week as we want maximum adoption and want you to get this out, buy it for your teams, et cetera, et cetera. We now have such incredible proof that the model works, so we're totally and utterly thrilled about that. Most big companies around the world have a really tough time with experimentation, right? One of the questions we ask in our survey of when we do a quantified score of a company is, to what extent do you tolerate risk-taking and failure inside your organization? And level 1 is if you fail, you're done, and it's what we call a CLM, a career-limiting move. Level 2 is we say we tolerate risk, but really we don't. Really, you're toast. So, but at least you say you do. Level 3 is you tolerate risk in innovation areas or sandbox areas, but not in the mission-critical aspects of the company. And level 4, it's pervasive across the company and measured. So for example, Amazon, for every team in Amazon is asking, how many experiments did you run this quarter? How many succeeded? How many failed? If you don't run enough experiments and not enough are failing, you're in trouble, because they want to be constantly learning. The future of organizations is going to be a learning organization, and that's what experimentation gives you. The next one is autonomy. Okay? And autonomy has a couple of pieces to it. It's the A in ideas. And it's about decentralizing decision-making and pushing it down to the edges of the company. Why? Because the people at the edge of your company have the closest contact with the end customer. Valve is a great example of this. Valve Software is about 400 people. They have no CEO, no reporting lines, no job descriptions, no management meeting, no meetings of any kind. They literally operate like a beehive. So if there's a bug in the software platform, I grab 3 people, we go fix the bug, and we disband. Every employee thinks, self-selects as to what they want to do. And it sounds kind of like a joke, but they get more revenue per employee than Microsoft for doing this. So the more you can push decision-making out the edge, the more flexibility and more resilience you build into your organization. And as we think about Peter's linear to exponential, in this very volatile world, you want as much decentralization as possible. The end point of autonomy is DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, where smart contracts will be the interfaces between the organization and the outside world. And the whole organization can run pretty much autonomously. The poster child of this is Bitcoin, which is just a protocol, and anybody can self-select to run a Bitcoin node or not. It's completely, there's no central organization. This is incredibly difficult for a linear or traditional organization to get their head around. Very hard to implement it to a legacy organization. Zappos tried for years to implement autonomy into their organizations. You have to start an EXO with these principles in place, otherwise it doesn't work. Okay? So very, very, very critical. ING Direct in Canada is called Tangerine Bank. It's a regulated Canadian bank with no CEO, no reporting lines, no job descriptions, right? Unbelievable. So when they do an online promotion, everybody goes to the phone banks. When it's regulatory or reporting time, the chief risk officer says, hey, I need help, and everybody goes to those systems. So it makes everybody it's much more fun for everybody, very difficult, again, to introduce into a legacy organization. Okay? The final attribute that we want to talk about is social technologies. And Peter, do you want to take a crack at that, or should I cover that one?
No, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, so social technologies is the peer-to-peer collaborative technologies that allow you to communicate and collaborate peer-to-peer. We have really good evidence today that peer-to-peer working is much more valuable to traditional top-down command and control. Your manager tells you what to do, et cetera. Right? Think about if you have a traditional organization, the C-suite or senior management decides to do something, it filters down through layers of middle management, gets to something to do at the endpoint. The people at the coalface are probably doing the wrong thing because they've got the wrong messages. They get reports in for what's happening, which filter up through all those layers, which takes unbelievable amount of time, and inevitably they get the wrong information, right? I'll give you this great example as IBM in the 90s was trying to figure out how important was open source software. So they went to all the CIOs of the Fortune 500 and said, how many of you are using open source software in your technology stack? And 95% of the CIOs says, no, we don't use open source. We use Oracle, we use Microsoft centralized, we need control, etc. So IBM was like, huh. So they went to the sysadmins that were running the technology stack themselves and said, how many of you use open source? 94% said, yes, they are. So IBM went, okay, who's more in control? The sysadmins were doing the work. So they made a massive bet on open source, which worked, right? So enabling peer-to-peer collaboration is incredibly powerful, and we have a ton of tools. Zoom, Discord is the one that's used today by almost all of the Web3 world in terms of doing this, but there's a bunch of others, Slack, Asana, WhatsApp has now got community features built in, etc. Because that's the clear value. When you can have social technologies connecting not just your team members, but your community, right? Real community happens when you have peer-to-peer value creation in the community. So incredibly important there.
What happens when the CEO is not watching, right? And literally, COVID could not have come at a more opportune time to drive social technologies. And I don't think we've seen a fraction of the social technologies that are being built right now that are going to emerge, 3 to 5 years post-COVID. And this allows you to get access to incredible genius around the world. It's geographic arbitrage, right? If you can't afford that AI scientist who's in downtown San Francisco, maybe they're in Poland, maybe they're in Brazil. But at the end of the day, these social technologies enable you to bring them on, staff on demand, onto your team as if they were right there. And there was an important announcement yesterday. Hopefully all of you have seen it, a new social technology that is lighting up the internet that's going to make this that much easier.
Why don't we, yeah, go ahead and play the video from Apple.
Play it.
Introducing Apple Vision Pro. Vision Pro is a new kind of computer that augments reality by seamlessly blending the real world with the digital world. It's the first Apple product you look through and not at. And you control Vision Pro using the most natural and intuitive tools, your eyes, hands, and voice.
Apple Vision Pro helps you stay connected to those around you. When someone is nearby, they will appear in your view. And Vision Pro will simultaneously reveal your eyes to them.
FaceTime now becomes spatial, taking advantage of the room around you. You can join a group call and see everyone life-size. As new people join, FaceTime simply expands.
It delivers a natural representation which dynamically matches your facial and hand movement. With your persona, you can communicate.
So what are we going to see there? We're going to see the ability for you to have interactions with your team members anywhere on the planet as if they're there, and really get out of the tyranny of the small boxes on Zoom.
Let's note that the imaging in virtual reality, et cetera, is getting to the point where pretty soon the resolution of a VR headset will be higher than the human eye, okay? So in a very short order, next couple of years, virtual reality will disrupt reality. So that's like, holy crap.
4K per eye right now. I think we're still a couple doublings away from that, but at the end of the day, this is about making it fun and easy and engaging. I miss an office. I miss the interactions. Zoom doesn't do it for me fully. I hope that this will. All right, it's now time for your questions. I'm going to put the QR code up there.
So remember to upvote. So now we've finished all of the attributes, MTP, scale, and ideas of an EXO. Let's take some more questions. Then we're going to take a short break and get to the best part, which is how do you actually build an EXO? So stick around for that. But let's go to some questions on Slido, and we'll start off. Go ahead, Peter. Why don't you take the first?
Sure. So the first is from John. He says, why has blockchain enterprise adoption been so slow? What's the catalyst team to change this?
So all of these new technologies, right, come with risk, okay? Can I go back just a second? The most insightful thing that you and Stephen put in abundance was the fact that we have an amygdala, okay? And that amygdala is there for scanning for danger. So when we were running around on the plains of Africa, if you heard a noise in the bushes, you ran. Why? Because bad news can kill you. Good news doesn't kill you. So if I miss some good news, I might miss some fruit that I could eat. If I miss some bad news, I die. So we're 10 times more likely to pay attention to bad news than good news because of the danger factor. When we come across a new technology, autonomous cars, drones, the first reaction is the amygdala going, oh my God, that's dangerous. Autonomous cars might kill somebody. Let's ban the cars until we understand.
And we saw Italy banning, ChatGPT.
Right? Why do you ban that? Because you don't want a robot killing people. We'd much rather have drunk people killing people than robots killing people. So the data, this is why you have to be very evidentially based around this. The reason blockchain is tough in an enterprise is it's new, it's uncertain, it entails risk. And big companies are really, really bad at risk. The catalyst that's going to solve it is EXOs growing up and supplanting the big companies. That's what's going to happen. Or it'll get to the point where the blockchain tools, like Casper, the new blockchain, is one of the most sophisticated enterprise-grade ones that we've seen. And that will allow enterprise adoption with all the resilience and security that enterprises need and want. So it's going to take some time for enterprises to get in. We're still in the crypto winter as far as enterprise blockchain adoption is concerned.
Let's go to the next question. Zarni says, 10x organizations are focused on leveraging technologies to create impacts. But according to data, most of the exponential impacts are felt in the global north.
Yeah, so this is true for now, right? So let's talk about EXOs. The birthplace of these was probably Silicon Valley, whereas Peter mentioned, we relate to risk as experience. Okay? In most parts of the world, if you take a risk and you fail, you're a failure, etc. And I'm going to tell another quick anecdote here because I have a friend who's done 8 startups, 7 venture-backed startups. The 8th one is a billion-dollar company. Okay? So when I was researching for the book, we went and interviewed the VCs that funded this guy. I said, this guy failed 5 times already, and you funded him on attempt number 6. He fails. You fund him on attempt number 7. You fail, and you finally got jackpot. What had you fund him through attempts? Let's note that this would not happen anywhere else in the world, right? In most of the world, if you fail once or twice, you're done. You're never getting funding again. Silicon Valley, these guys funded him 8 times before he finally succeeded. And the answer was from the VCs was incredible. They said, that guy is so crazy. The one thing we know is he's never going to stop. He's going to keep plugging away until he gets there. And at that point, we want to be there when he succeeds. So that repetition and that resilience for keeping is what made Silicon Valley successful. And essentially, these patterns are now going around the world. I want to give you an example of what's happening around the world in terms of democratization and dematerialization. The third fastest electric car in the world is called the Vega. Okay? It's 900 horsepower. You can go look it up in your separate browser window that you've been browsing while we've been watching this webinar, and go check out the Vega. It's a car, 900 horsepower. It's being designed, engineered, and built in Sri Lanka.
I've been to Sri Lanka twice.
That hotbed of automotive innovation.
Elephants.
Okay. If you can, they have no ecosystem, no expertise, no experience, no funding, and they've never done this before. I'm going to suggest to you that if you can build the third fastest electric car on an island of fishermen and farmers, you can do anything anywhere. So right now, all of the major breakthroughs that are going to happen in the next decade or 2 are going to come from emerging markets because of what I said earlier. You don't have to unlearn 50 years of industrialization.
And you don't have a huge immune system there, right? You can be the leader. We're seeing this in Africa, right? Nigeria in particular is a hotbed of entrepreneurialism. And it's just what we're seeing.
And I want to make 2 points. I forgot to say this earlier. When Peter talked about linear to exponential, there are 2 pieces of this that are unbelievably important. For the first time in history, human history, we have a dozen technologies moving quickly. In the past, throughout history, maybe one technology is accelerating or another. We've never had a dozen all double at the same time. Okay? Now, each is doubling. When you intersect them, that adds a whole other multiplier. Okay? Second, and more importantly, especially for this question, is throughout history, throughout human history, it's always been true that advanced technologies cost a lot. And only a government lab or a big corporate lab could do R&D, launch new products and services. Today, for the first time in human history, advanced technologies are very cheap. Solar energy is cheap, sensors are cheap, the AI tools that we use are basically free, the blockchain is open source and free. It means anybody can get into a legacy industry, come in with a beginner's mind, leverage new ideas, and completely disrupt it. So we're going to see an explosion of innovation coming from everywhere in the world, more from the global south and emerging markets because they're hungrier, and that's going to completely change the world.
Amen.
Take Vitalik Buterin, 18-year-old kid, middle-class kid growing up in Toronto, gets together with a few friends, they ignore their professors, and boom, we have Ethereum, a $300 to $400 billion ecosystem with 8 guys, right? Now, I will suggest to you that no banker in the world can get their head around Ethereum.
All right, next question here. Akshay from Kenya.
And by the way, there's some bylaw that says you have to be under 25 years old to program the blockchain. I don't know what that's written, but
Not true, not true at all. Akshay from Kenya says, what happens to businesses that can't be digitized and dematerialized? For example, farming, food production, medication. And I would say, Akshay, that we're not going to eat bits. I agree with you in that regard. But there are elements of the farming business that can be digitized and dematerialized. I'll give you an example, and it's not all the way, but we're heading towards stem cell grown meats, where we're going from cellular agriculture. Instead of growing an entire chicken or cow or pig, we're taking a stem cell, we're growing it in a vat, where we're reinventing how we're doing it. We're also going to vertical farming, where these vertical farms are operating 24/7. And the growth cycle is continuous, and there's no pesticides, the pH and the micronutrients in the water. We have to realize just because we did something the same old way for 100 or 1,000 years doesn't mean we can't do it better and more efficiently in a brand new way.
I want to touch on agriculture, right? The second oldest industry in the world. For thousands of years, we've been doing horizontal agriculture, right? 70% of our fresh water globally goes towards agriculture. 99% of that runs off and gets wasted, right? Now we're seeing vertical farming, hydroponics, aeroponics just tip over into economic viability. And now we're going to see explosive exponential growth in that domain. So vertical farms deliver 5 times the yield of traditional farming. The best calculation we have seen is if you took 35 skyscrapers in Manhattan, turned them into vertical farms, and ran that, just that would feed the entire city sustainably. So you don't need millions of square kilometers. I just want to make one more crazy point.
But then I'm going to continue.
Go ahead. Okay. The 5 most prolific food-producing countries in the world are the ones you'd expect: US, Brazil, China, Russia, the biggest countries in the world, right? Because they have the most land. Guess what the 5 most top food exporting countries in the world, okay? So the number 1 country in the world that exports food is the US. Number 2 is Holland, the Netherlands. Okay? Look on a map. It's like this big. It's like nothing. But they export the second most food of any country in the world. Why? Because they've completely technology-enabled all their agriculture, greenhouses, etc. And they export $70 billion worth of food a year from this little country that's barely the size of a city. So that's what's possible. Agriculture completely changes going forward.
You need to look at the intersection of these exponential technologies with farming, right? So genetics is another one. There's a new breed of cows out of China that produce 50% more milk per cow. There's a new strain of rice, PR23, I believe it's called, that is able to provide 8 yields of crops, reducing labor by like 60%. And then finally, it's how do you use drones and robotics and other things, right? The growing of the plant, the cellular elements isn't going to change, but everything wrapped around it to make it more efficient of how you produce it, how you collect it, how you distribute it is the digitization. Let's go to one more question.
Wait, I want to say one more thing about this. This is what we're seeing also in agriculture and around all of this. You see the immune system response. For example, France banned GMOs being shipped to Africa.
They banned Uber as well.
They ban everything.
You know,
but not to pick up, every country has this immune system. So I remember this is costing lives because people are starving in Africa and they're banning the shipments. I remember talking to the agriculture minister of one of these countries, and she just said this so powerfully. She said, it's really great to talk about GMOs, but can we eat first, right? And that just like lands completely. And we've now served 1 trillion meals around the world using GMOs.
How many deaths from those trillion meals?
And we've not seen any issues or public health problems. So you get this immune system response, the amygdala responds, and we operate at a group level or country level. And unless we have the data, this is why the evidentiary part of this is so powerful and so important. gather the data, run experiments, and that will tell you the way to go.
All right, last question here. Yannick says, what are the essential aspects that make up a team of exponential entrepreneurs? You know, at the end of the day, we're going to be talking about this in the mindset section, but it is a group that are united by that massive transformative purpose. It's a group that is going to build a culture of data-driven decision-making, a group that's going to be focused on experimental, creating experimental culture inside the organization, all of these. And it's a group that's, using the attributes in this book. But I would say the top three things for me is the MTP, data-driven, experimental.
And mindset.
And of course,
mindset. Yeah, so we'll talk much more about that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a 5-minute break, right? So if you need a break, go get a drink. While we're running that break, you're going to hear from some of our EXO community on why they're excited about being part of the EXO world and why they're excited about the book specifically. Remember, this is the second edition of the book. The first book's been out for a while. Mike Malone was the co-author on both sides. Peter, I was actually supposed to be a co-author on the first book and added a massive amount of value in the first book. And now we're launching the second one.
My publisher wouldn't let me print bold at the same time that this was coming out.
So 5-minute break.
Get some water, stretch, hit the restroom. When we come back, the most important part, how to build an exponential organization. It's going to be the how-to element of this, so please don't miss it. We're on schedule. We have an hour and 15 left with you. See you in 5 minutes. We're going to run these videos now.
What EXO has done to change my life is put me in the room with brilliant talent that can help me solve the problems that I see. I have vision, I see the future, but I don't always know how to get there. And so now I have access to staff on demand, to communities that engage themselves. They're actually interested. So I founded EXO Angels, which also has several of people from the community in it. And we've developed this Open EXO experience game, which puts the onboarding tool into your hands to get onto the platform, to know what to take as next steps in your life to make this an exponential world. So transforming the world for a better future, right up my alley. And I'm so happy to be here. So I invite you to join. Thank you.
Hi, Lars from Educate for Life here. Congratulations to the Open EXO community on the launch of Exponential Organizations 2.0. This framework of exponential organizations quickly became the operating system in every conversation I have about adapting education for modern professional practice. And I use EXO in my work with leaders that want to leverage human development in a tech world. Once again, congratulations on this upgrade.
Hi everyone, my name is Franco Chupa. I'm from Hungary, and my EXO journey started back in 2015 when I met Salim, read his book, and believe it or not, I sold my company to join the Open EXO movement. Fast forward 2023, I know this was the best decision of my life. I've been working on literally every continent with mid-corps and big-corps on their exponential transformation, and I've also trained countless EXO coaches to become part of the community and participate in the work we do to make this world a better place. I totally found my tribe here. This is a place for exponential learning for me, and I'm super grateful to be here with all of you.
Hello, my name is Michael Friebe. Greetings from Germany. I'm a solo entrepreneur and health tech research professor. And I'm very happy that I got involved with the Open EXO community because it changed my thinking, acting, education, research activities, and particularly my entrepreneurial activities by combining exponential technologies with abundance concepts. And that would help us to hopefully move away from the fee-for-service concept of healthcare towards more prediction, prevention-based, and global democratization-based health.
Year was 2018, and a chance meeting with Salim over dinner, he was visiting Bangalore, ended with a simple question: would I be interested in joining the community? And the answer was yes. That found me in Madrid the very next week. I went in to learn the framework, ended up staying and continuing for the community. The community is amazing and it's so powerful. I continue to learn every day. In fact, in the last 5 years, what I've learned far exceeds my learning in 30 years of my corporate and business life. And also, it has helped me find my own purpose and live that purpose every day, which is leave no individual behind.
Hi, I am Karina, and I am grateful to be part of Open EXO community, where I have the privilege of meeting amazing, diverse, and exponential professionals. But the game changer for me was the opportunity to find my purpose and using it as a North Star, the ability to transform some of my ideas into incredible and concrete projects, like founding the Exo Latam and the Exo Woman community, with the help and support from everybody here around OpenExo. You too can transform the world for the better. What are you waiting for? Join us.
Evening, everybody. My name is Sanjay Bana, based out in Johannesburg, South Africa. And the impact that the Exponential Organizations book, as well as OpenExo, has had on me is that, post becoming part and parcel of the community, literally, it shifted my mindset at a very practical level from scarcity thinking to abundance thinking. As a result of the community and the learning I got from it and the book, literally I've been able to move from operating very locally in South African context to being able to work on a global scale, impact organizations and business on a global scale, collaborating, co-creating, and actually moving humanity forward. So really, really massive impact. Thank you so much.
EXO helped me believe that company transformations are possible. Yes, I think they are. It helped me understand disruption and how it works, which was super helpful during the pandemic. And also it helped me gain more empathy with the new system. And I learned how to deal with that. So thank you to the EXO community for all these learnings. And thank you, Salim, for the first book. I'm looking forward to reading the second one. Congratulations.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for sticking around. We've been able to maintain an amazing audience, and we're excited to serve you here. There's a question that popped up that we want to kick off with because both of us are dads. We actually both have kids turning 12 right now. And JDeb says, hey, Salim and Peter, how have you applied this to your parenting styles? I want to raise my kids with an EXO mindset. Fantastic question. He's friends with Joe Polish, John, and Missy Butcher. I think about this a lot, and I have three things I want for my kids. One, and it has nothing to do with technology. One is I want them to find their purpose. I want them to have, I won't call it an MTP at age 12, but when I was growing up, my passion of space, like Apollo and Star Trek, drove everything. So that MTP, that passion. The second one is the idea of asking great questions. I give this advice to the top CEOs in the world and my kids. Ask great questions. It's the quality of the questions you ask, right? So important. And the third is grit, not giving up. How about you, pal?
I think there's a fundamental sea change. It's almost like linear to exponential or scarcity due to abundance. All of us grew up doing education and parenting on the supply side. So you were told, become an engineer, become a doctor, become a lawyer, become an accountant. So you trained on the supply side on a set of skills, and then you went to the job market to sell those skills, right? Many of us, I started engineering school because my dad was an engineer.
And I went to medical school because my dad was a doctor.
Right. So we all jobs came from the supply side. Now we're shifting over to the demand side, which is the MTP. What excites you? What gets you most passionate? The best parenting we've seen is where you go, what problem do you really want to solve, young child? Or what really excites you? And let them follow their passion. And they'll figure it out.
And give them the belief that they can, that the tools they have access to are extraordinary. There's no problem that cannot be solved.
And I mentioned this, by the way, your Abundance 360 conference was one of the best conferences I've ever been to in my life.
Thank you.
I've been to quite a few. There was a comment that came up when we were chatting with Ray Kurzweil. Somebody talked about parenting. If you went back 20 years ago or 30 years ago and you had a parenting problem, right? Your child was doing something or something happened. You had like no resources to get any help. You could basically ask 3 friends that were also useless parents because they had no idea. And you asked your cousin and your buddy and your mother who was also had no idea. Now, when you have a problem with your child, look at all the resources online, parenting groups, support systems, unbelievable people, gurus around the world who've studied this. The amount of available information to do parenting properly today is 100x what we had 2 generations ago, right? So this is why the kids today are so unbelievable. They're going over just much better parenting. They've gone from a scarcity to an exponential point. let's skip into the next couple of sections.
Yeah, we're going to be going very briefly to implications of EXOs and then jumping into building
mindsets,
and then building your EXOs. All
okay,
right.
so let's talk about the implications of an EXO, because what we want to do is, okay, you get the model. When we lift up, what are the broader implications for all of us? In the first book, we identified 9 major implications. We have a section, death to the 5-year plan. If you're creating a 5-year plan, by the time you've done, the plan is out of date, or you're spending more time maintaining the plan than doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Rent,
right?
don't own. We've heard that.
One of my favorites is trust beats control and open beats closed, right? Jerry Mikulski, one of our community members, really framed this beautifully. He said, scarcity equals abundance minus trust, right? So just think about that for like an hour. And if we can trust our people, if we're all aligned on an MTP, then you can basically let them do what they do and be an open environment. It's always going to be the closed environment. So those are the first.
Let me pick
9.
one more on this list here, which is number 9 here, which is everything is measurable and anything is knowable. We're heading towards a world of near infinite information, right? Where we have trillions of sensors. And if you wanted to know what the average spectral color of a man's jacket is walking down Madison Avenue, the cameras are there, the data is collectible, your AI can analyze a tsunami of data, and then you can start to ask, does it correlate with an advertisement campaign from any time in the past? So the quality of the questions you ask, once again, is so fundamental.
So those were from the original first edition. We've added 9 more because naturally we need to double. Right? So we've added 9 more, and I'm not going to cover these in detail. You can go read them up in the book, but they're really big implications, right? For example, we found out talking to Stephen Kotler that if you have an EXO type structure, you generate a lot of serendipity and you generate like an organizational flow state, right? Very powerful. We're going to this decentralization DAO kind of world. Peter talks about everything being AI enabled.
Yeah, we're going to be at a point where everything is smart, right? I've seen these $5 AI chips are becoming more and more capable. Everything's being connected to 5G, soon to 6G. So everything's addressable and knowable. So that's going to change the world.
A key one is data-driven leadership, right? Throughout business history, you became a leader in a company because you had deep intuition about how to run supply chain for the country. Then you became the global supply chain after that because you knew which suppliers to go after and which ones were most reliable, which had the best payment terms, et cetera. But today, with the world changing so radically, all of that experience is irrelevant. Now you need to run a bunch of experiments and be ruthlessly data-driven and evidentiary-based, right? So data-driven leadership becomes the critical path of how we're going to make decisions going forward. Another one that we love is called technological socialism, okay? Traditional centralized government socialism fails because you get inefficiencies and you get corruption. Invariably, you get corruption. But when Uber is matching a driver to a passenger, an algorithm is running that matching, it's hyper efficient. It's kind of a socialist application. It's the sharing of assets amongst a large group of people. And now you can have the benefits of socialism of asset sharing amongst a large group of people without centralization and without a lot of government oversight needed. This was coined by Harry Clure, a very close friend of yours, Peter. And we think this is going to be a fascinating thing to see in the future of governance. The last one I'll talk about is that government departments over time, I mentioned companies and impact projects, but government departments are starting to become EXOs. Nishan Degnaring, who ran or advised the Ministry of Oceans in Mauritius, pinged me and said, hey, we designed the whole ministry based on you. We're a small country. We have 2 million square kilometers of ocean to navigate. So they brought the fishermen into a giant community to act as eyes and ears, et cetera, et cetera. So all of these added together, and again, go read the book. We've got a lot more detail in each of these, but we think there's all of these huge things going to happen as a result of this new world that's now exponentially driven and organizing exponentially for this, okay? The next thing that we want to cover is really, really critical, and I'm going to pass it to Peter to talk about mindsets. Peter, over to you.
Yeah, this is probably the area I'm spending most of my time in. I think it's one of the most important things. Let me frame this in a way that hopefully you get. The question is, what matters most to the greatest leaders out there? Whether it's Steve Jobs, Martin Rothblatt, Elon Musk, Martin Luther King, whoever it might be, what is it that enabled them to be extraordinary leaders? Was it, the technology they had? Was it the money they had? Or was it the mindset they had? And I think everybody would agree that what enabled these leaders to navigate, challenges and opportunities was their mindset, right? Your mindset is how you deal with things in an instant. And if your mindset is that important, one of the questions I have for you is, what mindset do you have? And what mindset do you need to navigate the decade ahead? I think it's one of the most critical questions. And you mentioned earlier Dan Sullivan and Strategic Coach. So it was 12 years ago that I made a 25-year commitment to run a program called Abundance 360. A360, it's 360 CEOs, entrepreneurs, business owners that I mentor over the course of the year. We meet for 4.5 days in LA every March for the Abundance 360 Summit. And then around the year, we run these implementation workshops, these mindset masterminds, and we do this member matching. And for me, my mission is to serve exponential entrepreneurs. If you're interested in Abundance 360, go check it out. It's a360.com. We have a small number of openings we take each year. But my goal throughout A360, throughout the year, is to help you maintain your mindset. Because every day that we're bombarded by CNN, I call the Crisis News Network, our mindset goes towards scarcity and fear. Now, let's be clear, our brains, our neocortex, is a neural net. And how do you train neural nets? You train neural nets by giving them evidence after evidence after evidence after evidence, right? So if you're watching the Crisis News Network, the constantly negative news network, and you're seeing every murder on the planet delivered to you over and over again in color in your living room, you're going to be in fear and scarcity, I guarantee you. But that is a mindset that puts you back on your heels and is the worst place from which to build an EXO and be an exponential entrepreneur. So for me, there are 6 key mindsets that I teach, that I read about, that I practice myself. And I'm going to just talk about a few of these 1 second, because I think they're that important. I think mindsets, I could add purpose-driven mindset to this list, which is your MTP. It should be, step 0 on here. But I think your mindset is the most important asset you have. So we talk about a curiosity mindset, really. It's about asking great questions. It's about driving creativity. It's about staying adaptable. It's about being able to pivot and evolve. A curiosity mindset, that beginner's mind, as Salim mentioned, is fundamental to you. And if you're stuck reacting because of this is the way it used to be in fear and scarcity, you're stuck. You're not adaptable. You're not agile. You're the dinosaur, not the furry mammal when the asteroid is striking. The second mindset, which Abundance 360 is named for, is this abundance mindset. And I've got right here, I have these mindset mugs, and mine is my abundance one. And on the back it says, "How would you live life if there was no scarcity?" What does yours say?
How can you create a life?
Which one do you have?
I've got the exponential 10 to the 9th plus mindset, which is how can you create a life of 10x impact?
Right? So your mindset is shaped all the time. It's shaped by the people you're with and the conversations you're having. It's shaped by what's on your wall, what you're watching, what you're reading. I guide and guard my mindset every moment of the day. It is that fundamentally critical to me. Abundance mindset is a perspective shift. It's a realization that there's nothing truly scarce. What I talk about we talked about this in Abundance, talk about this in EXO 2.0, is with a scarcity mindset, if you have a pie and people are coming over for dinner and more people come over, you have to slice the pie into thinner and thinner slices. And an abundance mindset, it's, no, we're going to bake more pies, right? It's a perspective shift. We don't have water scarcity on the world. We live on a planet 2/3 covered by water. Yes, 97.5% is salt, 2% is ice. We fight over 0.5%. But there's technologies coming. We're about to launch a $100+ million X Prize for large-scale desalination coming up. So technology is a resource liberating force, right? Technology enables you to liberate resources like solar, like fusion, like water. two more mindsets. An exponential mindset, I think, is fundamental to our EXO conversation here today. It's the notion that we're going to make as much progress in the next decade as we have in the past century. And it's understanding as an entrepreneur, as a leader, that every company is going to be transformed. Every industry is going to be transformed. And you have to be looking at disrupting yourself before someone else does. The final mindset I'll mention here is a moonshot mindset. And I've learned this mostly from my friend Astro Teller, who says, listen, in a moonshot mindset, you're looking to go 10 times bigger, 1,000%, when the rest of the world is looking to improve by just 10%. And moonshots are one of the most extraordinary things. And if I could wish anything for my kids and for all the entrepreneurs I support, is for them to find that MTP and that juicy moonshot that drives them, that sense of accomplishment.
Amazing. And just consider how, I love what you said about you spend every minute of the day managing your mindset, right? How many people kind of have the self-reflection to do that? Am I in a scarcity or an abundance mindset? If you're trying to kind of build a company and build or navigate any of this world, you need to be able to operate and self-manage your own mindset. I think that's so critical.
And by the way, as a CEO, as a leader, your mindset becomes the pervasive mindset inside your organization. If you're in fear and scarcity, so are your employees, right? You need to lead by example in the mindset and build the structures. I don't care if it's the posters on the walls, the mugs, the conversations, the filter by which you employ people. Do they have the right mindset? Critically important.
Last night when you and I were trying to finish this, we had a mindset of TCH. I call that.
Yes.
Tired, cranky, and hungry. All right. So how do you navigate some of that?
Yeah.
All right. So let's get to the meat of this. We've given you the basis, the linear to exponential, how fundamentally the world is changing. We've talked through the model and the characteristics of the model. We've talked through the mindsets that you need and the broader implications of this. One of the comments I make is the next 30 years of the world will dictate the next 300. We're in one of those inflection points that's so profound that everything is changing literally in front of us. And you see that. When we wrote the book of the first edition 10 years ago, this was a very hard conversation. You have to remember that. Tesla didn't really exist. SpaceX didn't really exist, right? And I want to just touch on one data point just to kind of bring it back, because one of the questions was, how does this work in a very material world? When NASA was doing space shuttle launches, it cost about $600 million per launch, right?
Actually, it was a $4 billion budget of people,
20,000
infrastructure, 20,000 individuals. And if they launched 0 shuttles, it was infinite per launch. If they launched 1 shuttle, it was $4 billion a launch. 2 shuttles, $2 billion a launch. 4 shuttles a year. The average was like 3 or 4 a year. It was $1 billion a launch.
Okay, so that's the average. SpaceX.
I'm a space cadet.
You are. So SpaceX comes up with their total paradigm shift and drops it by 10x to about $60 million a launch. Okay, so that's incredible. Now we have relativity space and a new breed of kind of 3D printed. How much of the rocket is 3D printed?
Well, the first one, the Terran 1, was 90% 3D printed. And they'll probably stay around there. They're going to use some non-3D printed parts in their Terran R, which is a reusable. And of course, Starship is coming, which wants to drop it another 100-fold.
Yeah. So we're going to get down to about $1 million a launch. So think about this. A rocket launch is like physical fuel that you need and physical stuff. And it's had a 100x drop over the last 20 years and will probably be another 100 in the next 10 years. Okay? So that's in a very traditional physical environment. Every industry in the world is going to transform. And so this is why you need these mindsets is so critical going forward. So let's move to the final part of this, which is how do you build an EXO? This is kind of like the meat and potatoes of this. It's so critical to understand the steps. I want to first hear for a few seconds from Jeff Hoffman, who's the founder of Priceline, so built a massive company, global multi-billion-dollar value. He runs the Global Entrepreneurship Network, which is close to 30 million entrepreneurs around the world. Let's hear from Jeff.
Hi, I'm Jeff Hoffman, the chairman of the Global Entrepreneurship Network. And Salim, on behalf of all the people in our network at Global Entrepreneurship Network, congratulations to you and Peter. We are excited about the book and to share its content across our network. Our simple mission statement at Global Entrepreneurship Network is to help anyone, anywhere, start and then scale their venture. So everybody's trying to scale, and what's needed out there and what we do by building ecosystems for entrepreneurs is de-risk and increase their odds of success, which is exactly what you guys are doing and what the book is for. So thank you, Salim.
All right. Talk to you soon, Jeff. All right. So let's talk about what it takes to build an EXO, right? We have a 12-step program.
It had to be 12 steps.
It had to be 12 steps. You want to hark back to kind of things that work. Oh, by the way, just as a thing, could I go back to the full shot? So we have behind us a wonderful rocket. I call this the Spinal Tap rocket. If you've seen the movie Spinal Tap, they tried to build a huge set and they put the wrong feet versus inches, and they ended up with a. So I call this the Spinal Tap rocket. By the way, for those who've never seen the movie, if you go into a Tesla and turn the volume knob full up, the volume knob goes to 11. And you can go find out why that's the case. It's kind of amazing. All right, back to how do you build an EXO. All right, so let's go through some of these steps. And Peter, jump in when
we'll go back and forth on this.
Step one, and most important, is what is your MTP? Okay?
Hopefully you've heard this over and over again enough that it is sunk in.
We will beat this into you, and because it's been beaten into us. You have to select what fundamental problem you want to solve. And so that's step one. And you use the Moonshot Planner tool that Peter mentioned. Use your own devices. We have an MTP tool ourselves. Ask your friends, when I was younger, what did I say, what I wanted to do? What fundamental problem do you want to solve? And go
By the way, once you have your MTP, I want you to challenge yourself at a cocktail party to share it out loud. Don't be embarrassed by it. Like, my massive transformative purpose is, what the hell is an MTP? Well, you explain it. And by the way, when you go outward facing with your MTP, it brings people to you. You'll be amazed. Oh, you've got to meet this person over here. I've got a friend you've got to be connected with. It's a magnet to bring partners, community to you.
When I say at a cocktail party, I want to transform civilization, it doesn't really work. So I think I got to think about that. All right. So number one, you've got your MTP. Okay. Number two, critical. Join or create communities around that MTP. So if your MTP is cure cancer, okay, you can either create community around that because there's lots of people interested in that, or go to platforms like Meetup or others that have thousands of user groups and existing communities that you can join. Why? You want to find like-minded people. You want to share that MTP. You want to build a community or connect with your MTP to the largest group of people possible around you. So build and connect or just join communities that reflect your values and your MTP. Okay?
Yeah, I mean, the worst thing you want to do is have a team split because we have different purposes, right? MTP is like pulling a string. It unifies, it pulls you together.
That's right.
So composing a team around that based on your MTP is fundamental.
By the way, in the future, I think we'll be hiring based on the alignment of an individual's MTP with the company's MTP. Because if there's not alignment on that, there's no point really working together on things, right? So that's going to be kind of a prediction for the future. All right, step three is put a team together. And here we recommend 4 roles: a CEO, founder type visionary, a product person, a builder, and a business model finance person, okay? And lots of startup theory has around what composition should be. You and I have been talking about the idea from Jeremiah Owyang and a few others that the next billion-dollar company will be 3 people leveraging OpenAI and some of the other LLMs out there, where the CEO takes her vision and marketing. The product guy is building, using LLMs to build the product, and the operations guy is making sure all the AI chatbots are operating. And we think that will be the next billion-dollar company.
Step 4 is your breakthrough idea. And notice here that it's step 4 and it's not step 1, right? When you've got your massive transformative purpose, which is going to last you a decade or 2, now you're going to find out what technologies, what business model is going to be in service of transforming that. Because if you start with a technology, that technology may not last very long. It may be obsoleted at the rate we're going in a year or 2. What really keeps this all focused, train on the tracks, is in fact that MTP.
Once you have the basic idea, right? Now you need to kind of start putting flesh to that raw idea. So you have fill out a lean startup business model canvas coming from Alex Osterwalder, or the EXO canvas, which was developed by our community. You can find it at exocanvas.com. If you fill those two out, basically it talks you through how to think about partners, channels, customers, vendors, value proposition, et cetera, so you've fully thought through the idea before you start building anything. Please don't build anything until you've filled out these canvases to get a rough sense, because it'll tease out any mistakes you make, and you want to go as long as possible without building things. I remember when I was building Angstro, which we did, my co-founder Rohit instantly wanted to go talk to 100 people about it. I'm like, wait, no, you'll give away the idea. He's like, no, I want free feedback on the idea from 100 people. I get free feedback.
Can I stress that an idea is the easy part. I remember a conversation with Elon who said, when you look at the relative value of the idea to implementation, the value of the idea rounds to zero. It's all about implementation, manufacturability, and implementation. Again, I made the same mistake early on, just not keeping the idea close, but you lose. It's a lose-lose-lose when you don't share the idea, because you don't find out all the ways it's failed, all the people that can help you. Believe me, if you're the right person to make it happen, you're driven by the MTP, the idea is just the very first incremental step.
Right. So now you have your idea and you've built your business model canvas and EXO canvas, et cetera. The next step is to find a business model.
My favorite part
is finding the business model.
I am the most excited. I'm more excited about business model innovation than I am around the technologies.
I hate the business model part.
Really?
Yeah, I struggle with this a huge amount. We've been struggling for years in EXO to find testing different business models, et cetera, and I'm just like, God dang, can we just go solve the problem?
We should talk about it.
We'll talk more. Maybe I could use some advice from that. Let me talk through the business model side, right? Because there's a really big inflection point that's happened around building a business and finding a business model. Chris Anderson, who's the editor of Wired magazine and created the DIY drones community, and he invented the long tail idea, et cetera, wrote this book a few years ago called Free, arguing that as we make information more widely available, every business model goes to free. And then you have a bunch of layers on top of that free information, digital
demonetization.
It's demonetization, and you have an advertising business model or a subscription model or something. Let's use the example of music. We used to have 8 major music studios selling scarcity, selling you the physical cassette, the CD, the DVD, selling scarcity as their business model. Then we digitize music, right? All of those 8 pretty much disappear, and now you have 2 platforms, iTunes and Spotify, selling you abundance on a subscription model, right? So that we saw in the music industry, we've seen the same thing in books and in news. We'll see the same thing in transportation and healthcare and education is going to happen. So he basically argued that most business models will go to free. And it was a very seminal book around at the time. Kevin Kelly, who we talked about already, wrote a response to this saying better than free would be what are the business models around this. And he wrote a blog post called Better Than Free. Everything that Kevin Kelly writes is amazing, but please go read this blog post. It's seminal if you want to build an EXO. What he does, he identifies if the base information is basically widely available, like digital health information or so on, there's about 1 of 8 ways in which to add value to that. So if you look at this list, Airbnb is giving you accessibility, Uber is giving you findability, Facebook is giving you personalization, financial markets often sell immediacy, et cetera. And if you have an information-based industry, you're using 1 or more of these. And we think what Kevin's identified here are the business models of a digital world. And we think more and more 21st century business models will focus on this aspect of this. So critical to go check this out. Now, just on a slight segue, Kevin talks also about, they wrote a book called What Technology Wants,
yes,
right? Basically saying that the pace of technology is inexorable now, past our human ability to limit it, which is an AI conversation that we can have at some other point. But anyway,
technology wants to be free.
Technology wants to be free, and it wants to be abundant, even though human nature is like keep everything scarce and try and limit things, right? So now you have a business model, you've got some sense of what it looks like. Let's go to the next few steps of building an EXO, okay? Once you have the business model, the next step is to build the MVP. and this is again coming from lean startup thinking, and it's really, really critical. What's the smallest feature footprint of a product to get it out there and launch and test with customers?
Hopefully this is second nature and it's obvious to you, but building an MVP, again, this is about building a data-driven company, right? We think we know what the customers want, but we don't actually.
As Steve Blank said, no business plan survives contact with the first customer, right? Because you think you have a sense, but when you get out there, I remember Reid Hoffman saying it a different way. If you're not embarrassed by your product when you launch it, you've waited too long.
Yes.
Why? Because if you wait till it's perfect, you're going to get it wrong, and you're going to make assumptions that you haven't validated. So the minimum, I remember when I was running Brickhouse, Yahoo's incubator, we had Katarina Fake, the founder of Flickr, come in and talk to the engineers. And she said, talk to a team. And she goes, what's so great about your product? And they go, we have 20 features in this product. It's going to be beautiful, etc. And she said, all right, build the 2 that you think are going to identify the 2 features out of the 20 that you think are going to make it work and make it succeed. Launch those 2, and then get a feedback loop going.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, Ash Patel talks about very similar. He says, when you look at all the things you have to do in a company, instead of ordering them the way of a priority that you might have, reprioritize them in order of which ones are going to teach you the most and do those first, right? It's constant learning in this regard.
Constant testing.
And the 8th step here is validate marketing and sales. Again, this is part of your MVP. How are you going to market it? How are you going to sell it? How are you going to price it? Are you marketing it direct? Are you going through channels, through partnerships? All of this is fundamental to get to scale.
And validating marketing sales and managing your funnel, right? How many people do you have interested in the product? How many have signed up for the free thing? How many people might sign up for a paid model? What's your churn, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's a whole now very well understood scientific, very clear metric process on how to manage your funnel. Okay? Like if you're in enterprise sales, which takes like 9 months to do an enterprise sale, then you better have a big funnel and figure out you get a lot of stuff in the front because only a few are going to drop at the bottom and keep you viable. Right? So getting your funnel right and managing the sales funnel is absolutely critical in this piece of this. So now you have, at this point, you should have what's called product market fit, which is you have a product that people are paying for and with feedback from customers that they're excited about your product. If you don't have both those things, you don't have product market fit, go back to MVP or go back another step or figure out another breakthrough idea.
Everyone listening is probably saying that's great if you're a startup, but what if you're running a company that's at 50,000 employees and you've got, how are you still building an MVP?
You're still building an MVP because the only way you know that something's going to work today is by getting it out there and iterating. Okay? And big companies are very, very bad at this because they're trying to get it perfect before you launch it. People want to wait till it's perfect, etc. It never happens this way. Look at the biggest companies in the world, and they've all been iterating very, very well. Amazon is famous for constantly iterating. They had no idea whether Amazon Prime would work, right? You've got a bit of experience.
Yeah.
Tell the Amazon Prime story. It's so fascinating to see the mentality and psychology there.
Yeah, Jeff Holden, who is the VP of product, Chief Product Officer of both at Amazon and at Uber, who's on my board at XPRIZE, tells the story, when Amazon Prime was first proposed as an experiment, it was considered a foolish idea. Bezos basically said, try it. And now it's, what percentage of Amazon's?
Amazon Prime is I think it's 25%. The killer one is
AWS.
Amazon Web Services, right? And this is now, again, another example. By the way, I want to give a shout out to an Amazon policy that I completely love. If you have a big company, I dare you, go home and go to the office tomorrow and implement this policy. They realize that in any company, it's really easy to say no to an idea. Right? One of 20 people can say no, kills the idea. Whereas if you're a startup, you can go to 20 investors. One says yes, you're off to the races. So how do you deal with that impedance mismatch in a big company? So they came up with a policy, and it's called the Amazon Institutional Yes. So if you're inside Amazon and you come to me with an idea, and I'm your manager, I'm not allowed to say no to your idea. My default answer has to be yes.
And if I need to say?
If I want to say no, I have to write a 2-page thesis as to why it's a bad idea, and post it publicly on the internet, right? So they've created friction and embarrassment to saying no. It's way easier for me to go, just go do your idea. I'm sure you're going to fail at the next level, etc. And now the product gets tested, and at least now you have real data. One of the results of this policy was actually Amazon Web Services. Nothing to do with their core strategy, not on any roadmap. Nobody could figure out how to say no to it. And now it's one of the most successful products of all time. It delivers 75% of Amazon's profits globally. It's just unbelievable.
Another example is Kickstarter, right? Hopefully you've all heard of Kickstarter, played with Kickstarter. It was thought of as a platform for young companies to try their product out, get commitments early on. What we're seeing is large corporations actually trying things on Kickstarter as well to get early information about who wants what color, who wants what different product elements.
My fellow Waterloo grad, Eric Mijakovsky,
right, Pebble Watch.
Pebble Watch, he went to, this is a great little story. He came out of Y Combinator, right? Best incubator in the world with the best network in the world. Tried to raise $100,000 to build a prototype of his running watch. All the investors said no, because Silicon Valley is very biased against hardware at the time. So now he's got 3 weeks of cash left, right? He's like about to run out of money. So he puts up a project on Kickstarter, desperately saying, can I raise $100,000? Can I pre-sell my watch? Raises $10 million on Kickstarter, right? Now that tells you 2 or 3 really interesting things. One, all the investors are wrong, which is fine. This is why investors use a portfolio approach. More importantly, if you have crowdfunding, why do you need the investor? And now the sophisticated investment ecosystem around Silicon Valley is rendered irrelevant in a sense, because I can crowdfund something. But third, and maybe most importantly to the point you're making, for the first time in business history, you can validate demand for a product without building the product. Right? Throughout history, you had to build a product and go, do you like it or not? Customer goes, I hate it.
Now Eric has a new problem. He's got to build a lot more watches. He's off to China on the next flight.
But that's a great problem to have. I've got $10 million in the bank now. I've got to go do this. So, by the way, Sony Corporation is now launching anonymous Kickstarter campaigns and then funding the successful ones because it's just an easier way to validate success. So really critical.
Data-driven decision-making. It's not listening to the experts who tell you what they think.
Yeah, so constantly run experiments, validate your marketing sales, okay? Step 9, once you've got a funnel out there and so on, is to now implement the EXO attributes of scale and ideas. Do as much staff on demand, community and crowd, implement algorithms, leverage assets, figure out engagement models for your product, and then all the internal mechanisms. What interfaces where do you want to automate the interfaces between you and the customer? What dashboards are you running? How are you doing experimentation, and what experiments are you running, right? How do you decentralize decision-making, and what social technologies are you using inside the company?
Now, to be clear, right, it's not implementing all 10 it's necessary, right? And you might actually begin with a couple of these and then move towards others as part of your plan.
That used to be the case.
Okay.
So in the first book, our research indicated if you implemented 4 of these, then you became an EXO. But I think today the market basically says the data now shows that if you're not implementing all of these, somebody else is, right? And so the more you implement these, the better. And the faster you can implement dashboards, for example, the faster you've got a real-time sense of what's happening with the business. The more you can implement experimentation, the more you're implementing a learning organization.
And a few of these, there's no excuse not to be implementing them. They're just fundamental best practices as an entrepreneur today.
Yeah. Now, really critically, I'll give you a great example. There's a company out of Australia called Smart Group. And what they do is every quarter, they get 10 people, each of them picks one of the scale or ideas attributes, and they implement that attribute. So they have 10 projects going on a nonstop basis, implementing scale and ideas. They grew 5x over a 2-year period by doing this. And they were already a public company, by the way, so this is not a small company. They were already a public company, and then they grew 5x by applying the full scale and ideas methodology.
Our 10th step is to implement and establish a culture. But I would say, a culture begins from the very beginning. And it's, what happens when the CEO is not watching. It's the interaction between your employee base, between your founders. And again, it starts with that MTP. It starts with the original founders. And that culture is going to drive everything. Elements of the culture I really personally always want to be driving. It's data-driven experimentalism, fundamentals there.
Yeah. Now, we found over the years that having an EXO structure takes out a lot of politics, right? As we said in the implication, most traditional companies, almost all the conversations about what's happening on the inside, that person's product didn't work, did they get budget for that thing? Why is that guy trying to steal my team members? And within EXO, most of the conversation about what's on the outside, are we solving the fundamental problem or not, et cetera. So that's critical. And we found that by implementing more and more of the attributes, the culture stays young, alive, a learning organization, oriented constantly towards the MTP. Okay? Step 11, constantly retest your assumptions. So this relates back to experimentation, but you got to retest, is my pricing correctly? Am I really following my MTP? Because often you can drift off to the side.
Oh my God.
I've
been there.
We at EXO almost accidentally became a consulting company, and we were spending more time advising big companies than trying to solve big problems. The community actually rose up and go, hey, what happened to the impact side of it? And we're like, oh, dang, we kind of accidentally left that, because you're in your own soup. It's really hard to gauge and see what is happening around you. So make sure you have active advisors that are constantly calling you out and testing you against what you're doing. Are you aligned towards the MTP or not?
Burt Rutan, who was the famed aerospace designer engineer at Scaled Composites, he built Spaceship One that won our $10 million X Prize, has a quote I love. He says, question, don't defend. Yeah. If you're building, as a part of a cultural attribute, if you build a culture which asks, which allows questions to be asked at any time instead of defending yourself, as soon as you start defending your position, you're backed into a corner and you're not able to explore new areas. You're not telling yourself the truth. You're simply defending yourself. So question, don't defend is one of those cultural elements of asking questions.
Bert talking about this is so amazing. He goes, I've never been so goddamn excited as when trying to win this prize. I want to just do a quick shout out here.
Yeah.
It's so amazing to watch an X Prize unfold. And the rationale behind this is when you put up a $10 million prize, something like 30 or 40 teams will spend like up to $150 million in R&D trying to win the $10 million. So it's the most leveraged model for innovation ever, where you can crowdsource hundreds of teams. How many teams are registered for the carbon extraction prize?
We had 1,200 teams going after Elon's $100 million. We just launched this wildfire X Prize, and after the first month, we have something like 60 or 70 teams, all designing different ways. Detecting the fire is not the hard part, but if you found a wildfire igniting that's moving, and you had to put it out autonomously in 10 minutes without humans in the loop, how would you do it, right? And so it's fun and it's exciting and it's changing the business model, right? The business model, again, I love business models. The business model for insurance was always, fire insurance will pay you after your house burns down. What about flipping the model and saying, our fire insurance prevents the fire in the first place, right? That's
right. I want to just do an anecdote related to the MTP. One of my favorite stories at X Prize, and you watch all these teams like running around, like mortgaging their house, hoping to win.
Oh my God, yes.
Right? My favorite story is the oil cleanup X Prize funded by Wendy Schmidt, the $3 million prize for anybody that could double after the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. It turns out the oil cleanup technology has not changed since the 1980s, since the Exxon Valdez, because there was no economic incentive. So very quickly, a prize gets put together to say, can you double the effectiveness of existing oil technologies?
Can I?
You tell the story.
We had 340 teams around the world who registered to compete for this, to try and reinvent how you clean up oil spill on the surface before it hits the beaches and the fisheries. And we had amazing teams. The top 10 teams, one team was a family out of Alaska that mortgaged their home literally and built technology that came in the top 10. Another team, you can't make this stuff up, was a tattoo artist and his client. The tattoo artist had a vision and an idea. His client, who was a dentist, literally underwrote it. They built a scale model. The guys tested in the guy's jacuzzi, and the first time it saw full-scale oil spill was at our test facility, and they came in second.
I mean, and it's like,
what's great about that story, right, is if you're a VC or an investor and that team walks into your office, you are never funding that team, right? Like you're a dentist, you're a you have no experience, no background, no expertise in this. Never are you funding that team, and yet you would have lost out, right? And this is what's so magical about sourcing from the crowd. You never know what you're going to get. But if you have an abundance of people working on it, that problem is always going to be solved. And this is so critical.
And by the way, check it out at xprize.org. Please get involved. Salim is on our board. Anushan Sari, who funded our first $10 million prize, and then flew privately to the space station for 10 days, is now the CEO. I serve as executive chairman there. We've launched $300 million in X Prizes. We're about to launch another $250 million. Our mission is to crowdsource solutions to the world's biggest problems, not for ideas, but people actually go out and build this stuff and demonstrate it.
All right, final step in building an EXO, right, is try and turn yourself into a platform, okay? If you look at the history of the internet, Yahoo, BlackBerry, Nokia all failed to become platforms. Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon all successfully became platforms, which means you become like a coral reef and you feed an ecosystem of people that are making their living off you. And now you're wired into the infrastructure.
How incentivized am I to support your platform when it's the means by which I earn my revenue?
Yeah, the average YouTube professional today is making like $4,000 a month.
It's crazy.
It's like an unbelievable amount of kind of value that's being generated, created. Mr. Beast, who's probably the most popular YouTuber out there, found out something amazing about his background. He studied YouTube videos for 3 years before he created his first video, because he wanted to understand the dynamics so fundamentally.
Understand the algorithms that drove the economics behind it, and it's all about algorithms. Let's share 2 EXOs just as to hammer this in. Then we're going to go to your questions. So one is a company called Thrasio, who is actually built by a fraternity brother of mine, Carlos Cashman. And what Carlos and his partners did was they went on to Amazon, they went on to and found companies that had low revenues, product sellers who had low revenues, but had extraordinary customer reviews. And if you think about it, what does that say? Well, this supplier doesn't have a great marketing engine. And what they ended up doing was they began aggregating these.
First they were just advising them.
Yeah.
And then somebody said, why don't you just buy the company? And they're like, oh. So they started buying these companies. At one point, they put up a sign at an Amazon Marketplace conference: if you're over $1 million in revenue, we want to talk to you. And they had a lineup around the block of people wanting to talk to them. So they went
zero to a couple of billion?
In 2 years, they went from 0 to $2 billion in revenue. Okay, just think about that, 0 to $2 billion in revenue. And because they're using an AI to scour the marketplace, the whole thing is automated. They can literally find a product, reach out to the seller and say, hey, we think we can make you bigger. Do you want to sell? Boom. So this is like a next generation CPG company. Startups are now saying, I'm the Thrasio of this, or I'm the Thrasio of dry cleaning or whatever. It's been unbelievably successful. The highest rated EXO that we ever saw, because we scored them all on that model, is GitHub, right? GitHub is a platform where developers can share code and watch each other and kind of, and I can rate your code, you can rate my code. So they've created, and they put in all the elements: gamification, algorithms, staff on demand, etc. Now, they were 8.5 years old, and Microsoft bought them for $7.5 billion, right? I remember talking to the accounting partner that was managing the acquisition for Microsoft, and he was freaking out. He's like, I don't know what to put on the balance sheet. This company has no assets, no intellectual property, and basically no workforce. Like, what are we buying? So he's literally trying to kill the deal because he can't figure out how to put any value against it in the Microsoft accounting systems. And finally, Satya Nadella says, just buy the damn thing. I want the community. And now with ChatGPT, they have access to all the GitHub repositories because GitHub has been that successful. My favorite thing about GitHub is because it's open source and everybody is fully transparent, your salary, if you're a software developer in Silicon Valley today, your salary has zero correlation to the university you went to, the degree you got, or the grades you got. It's 100% what is your GitHub rating, and that's how you're paid, right? So the value of a computer science degree just went to zero. So this is a profound commentary on the future of higher education. As we apply that to doctors and lawyers and so on, ChatGPT will really transform all of this. Let's note, by the way, since the year 2000, we have written about 3 trillion lines of code around the world. And when an LLM or AI has access to all those 3 trillion lines of code, the next code you write is going to be that much better. Because if I'm a developer, you did software development when you were younger, you write maybe 50,000 lines of code, 100,000 lines of code. Never do you have access instantly in real time to 3 trillion lines of code. So what's coming in the future is going to be unbelievable.
The same thing in medicine, right? I like to tell people, every day there's 7,000 medical journals that are articles published in medical journals, 7,000. How many has your doctor read this morning? Well, an AI diagnostician will have consumed all of them, right? We're all going to have AI co-pilots, whether you're a doctor, a lawyer, an artist, a physician, whatever it might be.
I like the way you put it, where you go, it's not an AI that's going to take your job. It's a human using AI that's going to take your job, right? And so it goes very quickly.
All right. We've got 20 minutes for questions here, and let's jump in. All right, Max asks, what tools do you use to improve the quality of the questions you ask? What metrics do you use to measure their utility and relevance? So first of all, Max, I hope along with everybody else here, the instant response is ChatGPT. Even if you don't know what question to ask, going in and saying, I'm trying to learn about this area, what are the top 10 questions I should ask, is an amazing beginning to your journey.
I was doing a presentation to the top C-suite of one of the biggest consumer products companies in the world. And I asked ChatGPT 4 questions. What would disrupt this company? If I was a startup, how would I attack this company? What disruptive technologies could I take advantage of if I was the company? And I showed it to them. And they're like, holy crap, that's like $500,000 of consulting.
For free.
So I said, I'll send you an invoice. But this is critical, because the key when you can get into the routine of it is you get into the habit of just asking ChatGPT to help you ask the question.
Here's the challenge. We don't know how to think other than the way we know how to think.
Yeah.
It's obvious, but we're limited in that regard. So ChatGPT, the other option is obviously getting a group of people together who are knowledgeable and brainstorming. Believe me, at every executive meeting, every board meeting I have, I've got ChatGPT open in a window, and I'm having a side conversation. It's an extraordinary superpower that's only going to be getting better. All right, Juan asks, given the most finance and tech improvements are mainly led by financially stronger countries, is it really possible for developing countries to launch a successful EXO? Yes, without question.
Not only is it more possible, I think it's more likely going forward. Why? Because the cost of launching an EXO has dropped to near zero. Right? So there's no limits now to barriers to entry. You can basically get to product market fit for a few $100s.
And you have less competition, you have a green field to start. You also have the potential to have a regulatory arbitrage. In some countries that don't have laws against something, perhaps able to go in there and create a regulatory structure that supports you easier than in a crowded field.
Crypto, not allowed in the US, basically. I mean, come on. So lots of possibility there. I want to mention one more point about this, is that in emerging markets and developing countries, number one, remember what I said earlier, you don't have to unlearn 50 years of Harvard MBA thinking, you can leapfrog straight to new models, right? I'll mention again, Mercado Libre, the biggest company on the Buenos Aires stock market is an EXO, right? So now we're going to see the most successful companies. So what we're now going to do, because we have that Fortune 100 data, Chandra Nagpal just finished scoring the public companies in the Indian stock market. Right now, we can go and show every company where are they missing stuff and create an investment thesis around that. Over time, investors will not invest in you if you're not an EXO, because you're just going to do that much better if you're organized this way. I'm going to say it again. By the end of this next decade, every company, impact project, nonprofit, government department will be structured this way just because it's better and we have the data and evidence to show that. The opportunities in emerging markets are 1,000 times what they are in the Western world and the industrialized world. And you're hungrier and you're closer to the problem, right? If I'm trying to create a future for water solutions in Silicon Valley, I'm like 5,000 miles away from the problem, right? Whereas if you're in Mexico City or in a favela in Rio, you're 10 steps from the problem. So you're going to create much better solutions going forward.
Alexandru asks, can you have a personal MTP and an MTP for each company project you have, or does the MTP need to be unique? Alexandru, absolutely. I have an MTP for myself. It's the same as the MTP for Abundance 360. And if you're the founder, a lot of times your MTP will translate into MTP of the company that you're starting. You can have an MTP for your family or for a family foundation or a country. When I was with the Prime Minister of Greece last, I was saying, Greece needs a massive transformative purpose. It's that banner that literally lights the world as a beacon to come and support that MTP.
My commentary to some of the Greeks when I was once over there was that you were the birthplace of democracy, civics, education. They all need to be radically reinvented.
Rebirth them.
Let's reinvent education, civics, democracy in Greece, because that's the place to do it.
Yeah, so please, if you go through the moonshotplanner.com platform, you can go through multiple times and develop one for yourself, and then develop one for your company, your startup. And if you're inside a large organization, a company that doesn't have it, and believe me, it's not a value proposition. It's not a pitch proposition. It's not, we want to increase shareholder return. Go to your CEO and talk about the importance of getting a massive transformative purpose.
And if they don't listen, then you leave.
Yeah, and start
because
your own.
There's no point. Just go start your own. Do what Eric Yuan did and go off and build your own. Now that's why you need the MTP. It turns out when you do things for the money, it never works. When you do it for the passion for solving that problem, nothing will stop you. Just a quick shout out again to startups and the resilience needed by startup teams. Very few people know Google seems very successful right now, but at the time there were 12 other search engines, right? So we actually did some research and we found out for some of the big products out there, how many times did they have to do an investment pitch before they got funded? And this is in the book. So for Google, it was 340 investor pitches. So Larry and Sergey got told, no, we will not invest in you 340 times because there's a dozen search engines out there already until, what if they'd stopped at 330? Right? How many other entrepreneurs stopped like one pitch too early before they got funded? It's an unbelievably difficult thing. You need an unbelievable amount of resilience, meaning you have to have an MTP to keep you excited over time.
Yeah, same for me at X Prize, 150 pitches of no, 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 no until I met Anusha Ansari. And you have to come back to it each time with that same level of passion and enthusiasm. And so unless it's core and in your heart and soul, it's not going to succeed.
And definitely one per project. Like if my MTP is transform civilization, that's not an obvious project. But I could have a moonshot of let's update all of our institutions. Let's create a category of entrepreneurs that can go transform the world, because this community, you people on the call, are the only people that are going to change the world. Governments aren't going to do it. Big companies are too interested in the status quo. So you're the folks, right? So let's give you the tools and the inspiration to help and support. Yeah. By the way, if you go to learn.openexo.com, there's a full kind of training modules on how to learn how to be an EXO, et cetera, that's available through the EXO Pass. All right, let's go to the next question.
Pulkit says, what will happen to the masses of the population who don't upskill themselves? Will they be replaced by AI? How will that affect unemployment?
All right, let me crack.
All right, there's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot here. So think about this as having a slide rule to a calculator. If you're still trying to do calculations with a slide rule and everybody else has a calculator, you're going to be left behind, right? As Peter says, it's not going to be AI that takes your job. It's somebody using AI that will take your job. Now, unemployment, we have very strong feelings about. When we've seen major technology injections into society, everybody freaks out and goes, oh my God, there's going to be mass unemployment. We've never seen it before. I'll give you a specific example. I'll give you two examples. One is when we created ATM machines in the 1970s, there was all this hand-wringing. What will we do with millions of bank tellers? We'll have mass unemployment. Thousands and millions of bank tellers will be out of a job. Except what actually happened was the cost of running a branch dropped by 10 times. The banks created 10 times more branches, and the number of bank tellers has not changed at all. Okay? The three most robotics prolific countries where they use the most robotics automating the human manual worker are South Korea, Sweden, and Germany. The lowest unemployment countries in the world are South Korea, Sweden, Germany. So automation does not take away jobs. End of story.
Let's leave it with an exclamation point there.
Okay.
All right, Fleming says, given how important IP is in exponential technologies, how do you keep trade secrets while using staff on demand? So let me hit this. There is going to be a point in the not too distant future where IP is really immaterial. I remember having Astro Teller and Steve Jurvetson. And Steve was at DFJ. Now he's in his own venture fund, probably one of the most successful venture capitalists on the board of Tesla and SpaceX. We're having a conversation. There's a point in the near future where AI is so powerful that when you launch a product, the likelihood is that we're going to have technology that can reinvent it and improve on it in a half a cycle. If you're dependent upon intellectual property to protect you, instead of going out there and marketing and reinventing yourself constantly, you're going to lose that race.
Yeah. Second thing is the world is changing so fast that IP becomes less and less relevant. Now, the third part of it is the execution, okay? Whatever my IP is, let's say I've got the greatest search engine crawling thing of the world. If I have the passion to go execute against that, nobody's going to beat me. If somebody else grabs that, they have to have as much passion as me and out execute me. So it always comes down to how much are you trying to, how fast and how aggressively, how much passion can you bring to the table on how well can you execute against the idea, not the intellectual property around that.
You can't rest on your laurels. You need to have an amazing team, an amazing MTP, and constantly disrupting yourself.
Yeah.
All right, Anna asks, what are some pitfalls or misconceptions that companies should be aware of when embarking on their journey to become EXOs? How can they overcome those?
So something we didn't touch on today because we didn't have time is between the attributes of an EXO, there are a lot of interdependencies, okay? So for example, you can't implement autonomy and decentralize your decision-making if you don't have an MTP guiding thinking and guiding experimentation, et cetera, GE implemented the largest business training or corporate training exercise in history. They trained 60,000 managers on lean startup thinking, and it failed because they didn't have autonomy, okay? So if you wanted to implement lean, you better implement autonomy to give people free to run the experiments that are most exciting to them. So we document these in the book. We've got sections for each attribute on what are the requirements, prerequisites to implement this attribute. Make sure you have these things in place. If you have experimentation, then you need dashboards so constantly tell you whether the experiments are working, are you running enough or not, et cetera. So those are in the context of running an EXO. If you're a small company and you're trying to turn into an EXO, follow these steps, pick an MTP, and just turn completely into an EXO. If you're a large company, do not implement EXO inside your organization. You'll have an immune system response. The antibodies will attack you. You'll get a bunch of errors. Talk to anybody that's been in corporate innovation and ask them to turn around and you'll see all these arrows in their back, et cetera. Big companies cannot innovate. What you do is you take the crazy people in your big company, put them at the edge of the company and build one into adjacent spaces. So I'll give you a specific example. Nestle built Nespresso. For years trying to run it as the line of business inside Nespresso, inside Nestle, and it failed because the value proposition, go-to-market, product think it was completely different from the big food processing company. CEO finally put the team on the edge, brick wall between them and the rest of the company, and boom, every hotel room in the world has an espresso machine. So the way big companies innovate is they create EXOs off the edge. They run an EXO sprint to break the immune system, and then over time, ideally, the EXO becomes the new gravity center for the company. So that's how big companies do it.
Astro Teller tells it in a similar fashion. He says, listen, you're going to have your employees break into two different groups. There's the group that's responsible for delivering 10% annual growth, right? They're the economic engine of your company. You don't want to break that engine. It's fueling everything. But then you want to take those moonshot thinkers, those individuals who are driven by an MTP, put them on the edge, and they're responsible not for 10%, but 1,000%, 10x. You want to say to those individuals on the edge, listen, I don't want you thinking about 10%. You need to be only focusing on things that are 10x bigger. And that group on the edge needs to report directly to the CEO. And that CEO needs to have coverage from their board, because you're going to have a lot of experiments that are going to fail, right? You have to realize you're going to have a 90% mortality rate on these. And if you're failing and reporting failure after failure after failure, your board's going to fire you as a CEO unless you've got the top coverage. But it's that 1 out of 10 that yields, an extraordinary
100x.
success.
Yeah, this is a really critical point that's only possible today. Not even 5 or 10 years ago was this possible. It used to be that if you're a big company and you want to do some disruptive innovation, you had to make what was called a big bet and put a big chunk of resources and initiatives behind it. The CFO hated it, would try and defund it the minute they could, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Now, because the cost of attempting and experimenting is so low, you can run a portfolio of investments on the edge of the company. Don't even tell the CFO, and ideally you don't, and only double down when you see success. If you have a little startup on the edge that's growing 10x and you go to the board and say, I want a little investment, they're going to go, yeah, here. So there's a whole set of, and remember, we have a community of 25,000 people in the OpenEXO community ready to help and advise all your companies, et cetera, because we're passionate about transformation and solving this. And Peter has the same with the Abundance 360 community. All right, let's go to the next one. Max says, I'm just starting my EXO. Which skills should I learn? What do I outsource? And what do I outsource to other companies?
So first of all, Max, if you're the CEO of this, again, getting your mindsets in order is fundamental. It's understanding, how you're thinking about this, having an abundance, an exponential mindset, a moonshot mindset, a curiosity mindset. It is getting your MTP organized. Now, to be clear, you don't need to be an expert in all of the technologies. You don't have to be an AI expert. What you need to know is, what are you good at? What do you love doing? And then finding partners that are good at other areas, right? If you're great at fundraising or great at marketing, be the best at that, and then bring in the complementary skill sets that are going to support you as part of your founding team.
2 points I want to add. One, as Peter mentioned, if you're the founder, MTP and mindset is all you should focus on, because that's going to drive culture. Outsource everything else if you can. Second thing that's really important, I want to comment on Elon Musk here, maybe the most successful entrepreneur in the world today. Look at his methodology. He takes an MTP, solve transportation, right? Then he finds what exponential technologies will inform that MTP, battery storage, solar energy, et cetera. And where will that technology be on a 10-year exponential curve? And then aim for that point. Because it takes like 10 years to build a company, 11 in some cases, et cetera. So you aim to invest in that. He has no expertise in the space industry, the car industry, or the energy industry.
If I can add to that.
And he's created market leaders in all of those because of his mindset and this methodology.
Yeah, he calls it first principle thinking. So when he started on Tesla, and I was there at the early days of both companies, he made himself convinced that the battery technology would be viable when he looked at the spot cost of the metals involved, of the cobalt, of the nickel, of the lithium, and said, okay, here's the cost per ounce, per gram. And so I know I can get it down to this cost. There was nothing that would stop it. When he started SpaceX, he went to Russia to buy expendable boosters and found them ridiculously ancient, 50 years, and ridiculously expensive. And he came back and he got himself convinced that there's no reason you could not create a fully reusable first stage that could be fired over and over again. With that first principle thinking, he started literally with an aerospace textbook. He had a physics background. First of all, he's brilliant beyond belief. Just let's begin there, and don't underestimate that, right? Having extraordinarily intelligence in yourself and in your founding team is super important. But with the fundamentals in place, then methodically start building step by step by step.
There's something I want to touch on here. When Elon set out to build SpaceX and wanted to do the reusable rockets, I remember seeing a panel, you can find this on YouTube, a panel of astronauts. They're in their 70s, they went on the Apollo program, Buzz Aldrin, et cetera, et cetera. They got on a panel publicly and they begged the government to stop Elon. They said he's going to destroy the space industry because he will fail. They literally had tears running down their face saying, we spent our entire lives dedicated to the space industry, And he had to deal with this, and then he succeeded.
Yeah.
Why? Because if you constantly, every time they launched a rocket, they were testing 65 different things.
Oh my God. So
and learning every
those
single
rockets
time.
are wired with thousands and thousands of sensors. And just like the recent relativity launch of Terran 1, which made it to space but not to orbit, you get massive data, you update your AI model, your algorithms on the rocket, you improve. And that was never the case in the past aerospace industry. You had to have the experts guess right on the first time with their slide rules. All right, let's get one more question here. Daniel, what methods or approaches have you implemented to foster a mindset of abundance, and how has this influenced the trajectory of your organizations? Daniel, that insight of abundance came to me first at Singularity University, and it was the realization that technology was able to take things that were there but not accessible and make them usable, right? So we're bathed in 8,000 times more energy from the sun every day than we consume. And technology, solar, now perovskite, is making it more and more usable. The transformation of available, not accessible, to accessible is where it's going. And I collect, and you can go to diamandis.com and see all of the abundance charts. I collect all of this constant evidence that is showing us increasing abundance. And I train my mind by what I read, what I write about, who I hang out with, right? And that's, so if you consider coming to Abundance 360, that's our mission. A360.com, we are training your mindset year-round around these fundamental mindsets that enable you to become an exponential entrepreneur.
So I want to mention one quick thing as we are ending the endpoint, right? Please remember the book is available at 99 cents for the next
QR code up
next few days. If we could put the slides up. The Ray K chatbot is available for anybody for free. If you sign up, you just can go use it and say, I'm a shipping company. How do I turn into an EXO? And it'll give you the answer. We're super proud of that. We'll be loading up 700 case studies into this thing over the next time. So, and this is a time if you want to buy the book for your friends, et cetera, 99 cents, we made it as accessible as we can without having to deal with publisher issues, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. There's Peter's community at Abundance 360. There's our community at openexo.com, and all of us helping out. Learn.openexo.com has a rich training set for you. We're running out of time now. We're going to stick around for a little while to answer some more questions. Can you stick around for a bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think the questions are incredibly powerful and important. And then we're going to show up a Zoom link. Greg, I don't know if you can throw up the banner. But after we finish, there are hundreds of our community members that have gone and created a Zoom room for additional questions so that if you have further questions, you can chat with them, et cetera. So there's the barcode on screen. Take a click of that and go to that Zoom room after we've finished here to have and answer more questions and continue the discussion.
I just want to say, if you have to leave, thank you for joining us for 3 hours. That's no small feat. Our whole purpose here, mine, is to inspire and guide entrepreneurs like you to create a hopeful, compelling, and abundant future for humanity. I'm driven by that MTP. It's the reason I do what I do, why I'm here with my dear brother Salim, and Salim's to help create and transform the planet and create exponential organizations.
And the reason I'm here is because the only constituency and demographic that can change the world is entrepreneurs.
Yes, 100%.
You're risk tolerant, and by definition, you're crazy. Right? Therefore, you can actually change the world. And we've got now a very clear methodology, the value proposition, support system, tools, training, and the ecosystem for you to go do that. So the challenge we have for you is look deep inside yourself, find the MTP that you want to go after, and just go after it. This is the best time in the history of the world to be an entrepreneur.
The best time ever to be alive, except perhaps for tomorrow. You have a chance to uplift humanity, make a dent in the universe, and we hope that you do.
Yeah.
All right, so let's answer a few more questions for the next 15 minutes or so.
Sure.
All right, if you can stick with us, please do. And then again, there is the EXO Zoom room, which we'll lead you to after the next 15 minutes.
All right. Rodrigo is asking, how does the EXO model either address cybersecurity, ethics, sustainability challenges associated with exponential technologies? Okay. So I'll answer this in a couple of ways. One is when you look at cybersecurity, right? If you go back 5, 10, 15 years ago, we were worried, oh my God, the internet is about to collapse with phishing. Then we thought, oh my God, email is about to be destroyed via spam, etc. And we found algorithms to solve for those, okay? And people get freaked out going, oh my God, I can have cybersecurity and AI going after cybersecurity to crash my servers. What am I going to do about that? We forget that we also have the good side of it. Remember that amygdala that freaks out about negative things. We have the good side, so it becomes an arms race. So cybersecurity deals with that. Now, I forgot the rest of the question.
Let's go back here.
Go back. Oh yeah, sustainability. Note that by default, I want to just talk about the economic thesis behind an EXO because it's really important. When you're running a business, you worry about demand and supply, specifically the cost of demand, the cost of supply. Hopefully you're on the right side of that equation, okay? The internet came along, and for the first time in business history, allowed you to drop the cost of demand of customer acquisition exponentially. Online marketing, referral marketing, every Silicon Valley company is trying for a viral loop, in which case your acquisition costs go to zero, and for the first time in the history of business, you can acquire customers at no cost. Magical, boom. All these things, platforms pop up, Facebook, et cetera, leveraging that side.
I'll just mention one.
Hang on, what exponential organizations have figured out is how do you drop the cost of supply exponentially? Take Airbnb, the cost of adding a room to their inventory is near zero. If you're Hyatt, you have to build a hotel. So now you have the ability to go into any legacy industry with a very low marginal cost of supply, and then your market cap explodes because that's the denominator.
I'll mention two last things here on that question. We as humans tend to see the negative first. It's just the way our brains are programmed for survival. And the way that I flip that in a judo move is I say, listen, the world's biggest problems are the world's biggest business opportunities. So if there truly is a huge issue there, think of it as an incredible opportunity for starting an EXO to solve it. The other thing is that, like it or not, we tend to see the problems way out in the future, and we accelerate it to today. And we see what's coming, and then, oh my God, it's going to doom us. But we forget that we have a period of exponential growth, right? We're going to see more progress in the next decade than we have in the past century. And so during the decade ahead of us, we're going to have breakthrough after breakthrough after breakthrough, enabling us to deal with a lot of the challenges that we're concerned about. All right, Gil asks, how does the scale formula apply to manufacturing, equipment, installation, where lots of experience, relationships, and customization is needed?
So again, look at the rocket launch business and notice, which is a lot of expertise and experience needed, right? And note the 100x drop in costs, and then we'll see another 100x drop in costs. The same thing applies for agriculture and vertical farming, where the yields are 5 times what they used to be. Even horizontal farming, we now have drones scanning fields with infrared to scan for where there are disease centers so that we can pocket out and treat those plants specifically. So all of these exponential technologies, each of them is adding a 10x capability and benefit to the legacy environment.
Yeah, we're going to see AI and VR reinvent how we design and manufacture. I'm going to describe something I have in my mind. It's going to go to a virtualized 3D studio, and the AI is going to build something. I'm going to look at it, spin it around, and say, yes, that's it, please print. And the speed of going from mind to materialization is just exploding onto the scene, right?
Yeah.
3D printing, we have a dear friend, Avi Reichenthal, head of Nexa 3D, been looking at, a 10x increase in speed, 100x increase in material strength, full color, mixed materials. We're truly reinventing how we manufacture stuff. We are so locked in to how we've always done stuff, whether it's farming, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's designing, and all of this is changing rapidly.
All right. Sai, you said questions. That was a refreshing point you made about our system, education system being outdated. I'm not sure it was refreshing. It was kind of saddening and tragic, but yes, a fair point. What key subjects should we add to update our education system?
I've got a blog coming out about this in the next few days. Go to ChatGPT and ask it a question. Ask the question, in order to deal with accelerating future and oncoming of AGI, what should we be teaching our kids? Fascinating answers, right? Has nothing to do with what we normally do. It's really about agility. It's about great question asking. It's about morals and ethics. It's about a whole range of soft skills It's how to make a compelling argument, how to lead. These are the things that we're not currently teaching in our schools.
Yeah, I mean, we could spend a day just on education, right? But just to summarize, all our education systems are push-based systems. You get a bunch of kids into a classroom and you try and cram algebra into them. Meanwhile, most of them are thinking about lunch, right? But today, if you think about how the world works, you pick a topic that you're interested in, you pull down the information you need to solve that problem. For anybody that's a college graduate and out in the workforce, how much of your college education are you actually using in the workplace? Answer is almost zero. And that gives you a hint of where things are going. So we're going to go from push-based education systems to pull-based learning systems driven by an MTP. Our kids are 12 years old about. I'm desperately hoping the entire university system collapses in the next 6 years before they have to go there, because I hope they don't have to go through what I went through at university and be structured more and more, right? You put it really well. When you're doing a master's degree in biotech or in a brain, right? You're getting more and more narrow.
Yeah, today, as someone who's got a doctoral degree, I was in abundance. I talked about describing to my grandfather what I was working on. And I say, look, you see the dirt over there? He says, oh, you're an expert in the dirt. No, no, no. In the dirt, there's these little microorganisms called bacteria. Oh, you're an expert in those. No, 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 no. In the bacteria, there's this thing called DNA that codes for life. Oh, you're an expert in that? No, no. In there are these little things called plasmids. You're an expert in that? No. There's this enhancer sequence, and I'm an expert in that. So, I mean, at the end of the day, we've gone so narrow because that's what was needed. AI is going to enable us as our co-pilot to go much, much broader. But we, as Salim says, both high school and university is going to need to be reinvented.
Yeah. If you're doing a master's degree in neuroscience today, by the time you finish your master's degree, you're out of date, okay? And so this is a structural issue. Our ability to teach something is being outpaced by the changes in that subject area. And so we need a completely new model where we're going to pull down the learning as we need it for whatever job that's going on. Forget the 20 years of education and then you're out productive in the workforce for 60 or 50 years and then you retire. We're going to have to be online, nonstop practicing, learning. The most valuable colleagues and employees you have are the ones that learn the fastest.
All right, last question from Alexandru. Peter, you've shared a model of ChatGPT-like platform that you can personally use for creating an MTP and moonshot. Can you please share more on how you run it and feed it? Sure, Alexandru, when you go and use it, and again, there's a free version of it right there for you, it's going to prompt you. It's going to prompt you on your MTP. It's going to start to ask you questions. But as you answer the questions, based upon what you put in so far, it's going to generate a variety of different options for you. And then you can pick the options. And so it's really a thinking partner. It's a thought partner. So when I design my MTP, I'm clear about who do I want to be a hero to? And then what are the action verbs? And what is the end goal? So again, it's an iterative process. It's fun. It's easy. And again, one of the things that is important for me inside of my Abundance 360 community is that every member has created a massive transformative purpose. By the way, it doesn't have to be transforming the world. Your MTP can be narrow and specific, but it's what wakes you up in the morning and gets you excited, right? And then once you have that MTP, my A360 members have their moonshot they're working on as well.
And at OpenEXO, we now have an entire community, 25,000 people in 140 countries, ready to help you build your EXO and build your moonshot with advice, experience, et cetera, et cetera. We curated this book with the help of that entire community. So come join us. It's free to join. There's an unbelievable amount of resources available. Pick your MTP and go solve for that area, solve for that, leveraging these new technologies.
Let's put the QR code for the Zoom room up once again, if we could.
So the community is going to be reconvening at this Zoom room. A bunch of our community members are ready to answer all your questions. They've heard me rabbit about a thing. You'll hear a very refreshing note. We learn an unbelievable amount from our community because we've created basically like a hive mind. And I'm sure you're seeing this at Abundance because everybody's seeing different things. When you can reconnect, the overall community learns faster collectively as a group. So it's incredibly powerful to be part of both of these communities. Please do join.
A pleasure, buddy.
God, it finally got out.
A lot of fun.
I don't know how many of our community members we lost while waiting for the second edition to come out. But 3-4 years in, people were clamoring for it. Now it's finally out. It looks incredibly likely with the launch of this second edition that EXO will crack into the top 10 best-selling business books ever published. It's like that crazy. Thank you to all of you that have been part of that and all the help and support, including our wives.
Yeah.
And
a special shout out to Greg O'Brien, who's been running this AV, and Cheo Rose Washington, who's been running our Q&A, to Tyler and Kevin, who've been driving the marketing here to both communities.
And all the watch parties, I hope you have some alcohol or other substances to keep you going. I'm off to catch a flight. Peter, it's been an absolute honor to share this journey with you. We almost got into it with the original book, but now we're really in it. And as usual, it's just so inspiring watching you. You've been such an inspiration to me and so many millions of people with the abundance thinking, plus the mindsets, plus the moonshots. So thank you for everything and what you do.
Thank you for what you've built and spawning the original idea of an exponential organization. And thank you to our Singularity University community as well for all the support, inspiration. Check out su.org as well. Take care, everybody. Be well.
Take care.